Chapter 731 Demons 3. For a fraction of a second, the others stared at him again, as if remembering he existed. Then their attention snapped back to the demons, because the sight in front of them did not allow distraction. The old man glanced at Michael. There was surprise in his eyes. "I do not know what is happening," the old man said. His gaze shifted again, tracking the movement of the demons. "But I know what must be done." The old man's expression hardened. "If this continues," he said, "it will become far worse." He lifted his hand. Space trembled. "We stop it here." Then he vanished again. The other rank 3 followed, leaving only Michael behind, but this time not without dropping a nod at Michael first. "This is insane," Michael thought mentally as he maintained his distance. Did the disappearance of the demon lord have to do with this? Michael said aloud as he brought his spear out of his soul space together with the damaged coffin of the Forgotten that houses his undead. He didn't know what was happening, but he felt like he should do his part before this got worse. When the old man entered the fray, it was like they knew, or could rather obviously see, he was the most dangerous one and ganged up on him. Regardless of how powerful he is, except he is willing to go all out, just as Michael's undead has been able to hold back the rank 4 from the demonic faction, the demons were also able to do the same for the old man. But thankfully with his presence, the pressure on the 3 other races reduced, though it was still a lot for them to handle. Even with the peak rank 3 Amazari silver-haired elder, and the 2 though individually weak rank 3 stonekin but strong together, the situation didn't get much better. Michael could feel the old man's gaze land on him several times. Michael knew the old man was aware of him having a good amount of rank 3 undead. But what Michael didn't know was that though the man did know he had a good amount of rank 3 undead to be able to subdue a suppressed rank 4, good in the old man's mind was having at most 5 peak rank 3 undead. This misconception made Michael even more comfortable in releasing his undead. Though he acted like he didn't care, Michael had honestly been a bit concerned about the Federation's reaction to his power, but seeing as the old man did not react, he did not know. Michael felt more at ease. There were about 40 rank 3 combatants on each side of the 3 races, and on the demon side there were about 300 rank 3. However, the 3 races had survived before this was impressive, but given the bodies on the floor, it was enough to say enough about their tragic fate. Each race took about double the size of their group. About 80 for each group, meaning the rest were either focused on the silver-haired elder, the stonekin, and the old man who took the biggest number individually but was skilled enough to manage more than the other 3. 80 undead should be enough, Michael thought. In any case, if they were not enough, he still had about 180 more undead he could bring out. Willing his intention to the damaged coffin of the Forgotten, Michael started summoning his undead. The old man continued fighting, but his gaze never truly left Michael. When Michael looked as though he was about to act, the old man's curiosity stirred. 5 rank 3 undead would certainly be powerful. Against a single target, especially a suppressed rank 4, they could change the flow of battle. But this was different. This was a battlefield drowned in numbers. Against hundreds of rank 3s, 5, even peak ones would not be decisive. Or so he thought. Then the first undead emerged. It was still in its humanoid form. A rank 3. The second followed immediately. Then the third. The fourth. The fifth. The old man's brows knit together. 5. That matched his expectation. Then the 6th emerged. Then the 7th. Then the 8th. One after another, undead poured out in an unbroken sequence, each one radiating a stable, unmistakable rank 3 aura. The old man was not the only one who froze. The Amazari elder's breath caught in her throat. The stonekin elders who were also paying attention stiffened mid-motion, their bodies momentarily forgetting to move. Even the demons reacted. A sharp, distorted roar tore through the battlefield. "Stop him now!" The shout came from a high-ranking demon near the rear, its voice carrying both fury and urgency. The moment the command was given, the demonic formation fractured. Several groups peeled away from the main engagement at once. Dozens of rank 3 demons breaking off and turning in unison. Their eyes locked onto Michael. They rushed him. At the same instant, Michael's undead moved. No orders were spoken. They surged forward as one, black auras flaring as they intercepted the charge. The air between the two forces detonated in a violent collision of mana and flesh. Boom! Shockwaves rippled outward as demon and undead slammed together. Some continued fighting in the material world while some immediately entered the void to continue. But still, the summoning did not stop. Another undead emerged. Then another. Then 5 more. 10. 20. The chill began to spread. At first, it was subtle, a tightening in the chest, a sense that something was wrong. Then it became unmistakable. The number of undead reached 50. Then past it. No one was counting anymore, because the battlefield itself had changed. The demons were being forced back. Not because they were suddenly weaker, but because they were being matched and getting closer to being outmatched. The silver-haired Amazari elder felt her scalp prickle. This, she murmured under her breath, eyes wide. What sort of sorcery is this? One of the Stonekin elders spoke too. This is an army. It was an exaggeration to call 80 figures an army, but in the supernatural world, if the power was high enough, even 20 figures could count as an army or at least a special kind of army. The demons felt it too. The initial rush faltered as undead numbers continued to swell. Behind the front lines, filling gaps instantly. Michael hovered calmly behind them, spear resting in his hand. As for the old man, for the first time since entering the battlefield, his expression truly changed. His gaze sharpened as he counted. 5 peak rank 3 undead. That was what he had expected. That was what would have been reasonable. Where did this 8th come from? His eyes narrowed. He finally understood. He had underestimated the scale of the youth's strength. He couldn't deny he himself felt scared in his heart, though he wouldn't admit it. Just what the boy had shown now, if at any time Michael wanted to deal with him as long as they could control his abilities related to the void, his life would be in danger, except maybe he could do something to Michael. This thought made the old man feel suddenly insecure. This, the old man muttered under his breath, dodging a demon's strike as his attention flicked back to Michael again. How many does he truly have? Is this all? The demons too had come to a realization. They were in a very messed up situation. Just when everything seemed to be settling, just when the demonic pressure began to bend under the weight of Michael's reinforcements. Michael felt it, a terrifying aura from behind. For a split second, it felt like the entire battlefield noise muted, as if the world itself had held its breath. Michael's pupils narrowed. He turned his head only slightly and a fist was already there. An inch away from his face. A human fist, wrapped in compressed mana so dense it looked like the air around it had been carved into a weapon. Phase shift. Then Michael vanished and reappeared 10 meters away in a different location. Boom! The shockwave ripped through the air in his former location. Michael's gaze snapped there and lifted his spear instinctively. But his attacker did not chase blindly and pulled back into the void. For an instant, Michael managed to see a silhouette with a human frame. Human. That confirmation landed like a weight in Michael. A human was here. Demonic supernaturals? Someone who could approach him through 80 rank 3. Undead and a battlefield full of death without being noticed until the last inch made Michael's heart beat fast. The man's body appeared again a few seconds later. But Michael was able to dodge this time again with phase shift, except he was slower. This time, even if he didn't get hit. It was then others in the battlefield reacted as well. As the main figure here at this moment, Michael was the center of attraction. Chapter 732 Assassins? 1. Michael wanted to let out a curse. Did that rank 3 have no shame, sneaking up on a harmless rank 2 junior? However, even after a few seconds passed, the attacker did not reappear. That did not make Michael feel relieved. If anything, it made things worse. After all, he was in the open and they were in the dark. Compared to them, he was the one exposed. Michael's grip on his spear tightened. Without hesitation, he issued a silent command. Spartan, come. The undead who looked eerily human was still ahead, locked in combat with 2 rank 3 demons. The order reached him instantly. He disengaged without hesitation. The two rank 3 demons he had been fighting reacted a heartbeat too late. Spartan stepped backward in midair, and in that same motion, the air in front of him ignited in black flames as he used his law. Mana traced itself in the air, forming a flawless magic circle that burned briefly before collapsing inward. A fire spell detonated. One demon crossed its arms to block. They vaporized at the elbows. The other demon roared and unleashed its law, hardening its body into jagged crimson armor. Its claws tore forward, carrying corrosive force that warped the air. Spartan did not move. Another magic circle formed. Black flames poured out and clung to the demon's armored flesh like living ink. The demon screamed as its energy and flesh were eaten away, peeled from existence layer by layer. Its strength collapsed inward, feeding the fire instead of resisting it. The remaining demon howled. Its eyes flared blue and the air around it liquefied. Water burst into existence from nothingness. It was not simple water either. It shimmered with layered pressure, dense enough to bend light, heavy enough to crush steel. The space around Spartan flooded instantly. Waves spiraled upward, forming a rotating prison of compressed water that closed in from every direction. Within it, pressure multiplied again and again, seeking to grind everything inside into formless pulp. A weaker supernatural would have been torn apart in an instant. Spartan did not even slow. The water touched the edge of his black flames and vanished, looking as though it had been consumed. The demon's pupil shrank. No! It forced more power into the law, veins bulging as the water thickened, turning dark and viscous, carrying crushing force meant to drown even spiritual bodies. The black flames flared. They spread through the water instead of being smothered by it, devouring the law energy itself like fuel. Wherever the flames passed, the water ceased to exist, leaving behind empty pockets of distorted. The demon staggered. Spartan stepped forward. Another magic circle traced itself in the air. A column of black fire descended like judgment. It struck the demon from above, piercing through the remaining water defenses as if they were illusions. The demon screamed as the flames sank into its chest, spreading inward. The water prison imploded. What remained of the demon fell apart midair, its body breaking into fragments of dissolving ash before being swallowed entirely by the flames. The power ranking of Michael's undead legion was a bit crooked, as one could not absolutely say one undead was stronger than another. Surface ranking was possible, but Michael, who knew more about his undead than anyone else, understood that if it came down to a fight to total destruction, his undead were capable of many surprises. As for why he did not call any of his other undead immediately, just because they were strong did not mean they were the best at protecting. At least to Michael's understanding, an undead like Ghost was strong, but it was not exactly versatile while being strong at the same time. In any case, Spartan was not the only undead he had called out immediately. The other one was simply somewhere in the dark. Spartan turned and got ready to appear beside Michael when killing. Intent stabbed through the chaos from behind him. Michael's instincts screamed, but fortunately he had already been prepared from the start. Space folded for an instant. The assassin struck where Michael had been, a blade of condensed force slicing through empty air with terrifying accuracy. It missed by less than a breath, but was immediately met by another strike made by a figure in a black coat. It was Fade, the other undead Michael had called out to protect him, except he had not been as loud about it as he had been with Spartan. Phase shift. Michael reappeared several meters away when a second figure emerged from concealment the moment Michael reformed, timing the strike perfectly for the instant his spatial displacement ended. Michael barely had time to react. His spear snapped up. Clang. The impact rang out like a struck bell. For a fraction of a second, Michael blocked it, but that fraction was all he got. The force behind the blow was monstrous. Michael's arms screamed, and the power embedded in the strike detonated outward instead of dispersing. Boom! Michael was hurled downward. The air collapsed behind him as he fell like a meteor, before slamming into the ground below. The earth exploded. A crater dozens of meters wide bloomed outward, stone and soil vaporizing instantly as shockwaves rippled through the battlefield. The moment Michael was sent crashing into the ground, every undead within range reacted at once. The undead that had been locked in combat with demons twisted mid-fight, heads snapping toward the crater, and started moving instinctively, abandoning their current opponents as if drawn by an invisible thread. But before they could fully converge, a voice echoed inside their minds. It was a familiar voice. Continue fighting, the voice told them. The undead froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough to realign, then turned back to the battlefield. Fury redirected, violence renewed. Demons who thought they had found an opening were torn apart moments later, punished for the brief lapse. Only 2 undead did not go after the other demons, Spartan and Fade. Chapter 733 Assassins? 2. Only 2 undead didn't go after the other demons, Spartan and Fade. Spartan did not even glance at the chaos around him. The instant Michael was struck, he moved. Space warped as he crossed dozens of meters in a straight line, black flames roaring around his body like a living mantle. The rank 3 assassin who had delivered the blow barely had time to widen his eyes before Spartan was on him. There was no spell or skill cast, just a fist wrapped in devouring fire. The punch landed squarely in the assassin's guard. The law protecting him screamed. Black flames surged inward, bypassing defense, consuming the reinforcement itself. The assassin was blasted backward, body spinning uncontrollably as chunks of energy peeled away from him like ash. Spartan followed relentlessly. A magic circle formed mid-stride, snapping into place with brutal precision. Black fire erupted again. The assassin barely managed to twist aside, losing an arm in the process as the flames tore through empty space where his torso had been a heartbeat earlier. He screamed in disbelief. This thing! Spartan did not let him finish. On the other side of the battlefield, Fade finally revealed his true form. Fade's humanoid form split apart like shedding skin, dissolving into shadow and bone as something enormous emerged from within. A massive black praying mantis, taller than a building, unfolded into the air. Its body was jagged and sleek, layered with natural armor that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Multiple eyes glowed faintly along its triangular head, each one locking onto the assassin with terrifying focus. Scythes longer than spears unfolded from its forelimbs. The assassin's breath caught. Aren't you supposed to go and protect your master? What kind of creature are you? Fade did not answer. It vanished, its presence disappearing along with it. The mantis reappeared behind the assassin instantly, scythes slashing down in a cross that tore space itself. The assassin barely dodged, rolling away as the attack carved a rift through the air where he had been standing. Fade pressed forward. The assassin activated his law fully now, shadows thickening around his body, blades of condensed darkness forming and launching outward in rapid succession. Fade cut through them and continued pressing forward. Back at the crater, dust and debris were still settling. A hand pushed against shattered stone. Michael rose slowly. His body ached. His arms trembled faintly. Blood ran freely now down his forearm. Unlike his undead that had not only been blessed by extraordinary materials to strengthen their foundation but also fused with his blood, which made them stronger than their level would suggest. No matter how strong he was, Michael was still just a rank 2 awakener. But his eyes were clear. Michael looked up and saw Spartan tearing into the second assassin without restraint. Saw Fade's massive form dominating the shadows. Saw his undead legion continuing to grind the demonic forces down. Exactly as ordered. Michael exhaled. Good. Having time to himself before others focused on him again, Michael left the battlefield with Earth Escape. Spartan advanced without hesitation. The assassin staggered through the air, one arm already gone, blood spilling freely. He tried to retreat into the void, forcing his law outward in a desperate surge, but Spartan followed straight through the distortion. Black flames clung to Spartan's body as he stepped into the warped space, his form flickering but never slowing. The assassin lashed out blindly. A blade of compressed force tore across Spartan's side. It landed. The strike ripped through flesh and bone alike, carving a deep line across Spartan's torso and exposing the darkened structure beneath. Black flames guttered violently for a brief instant. But Spartan did not stop. He did not even react. He seized the assassin by the throat with one hand and drove him downward. They smashed into the ground hard enough to crater it again, shockwaves tearing outward. The assassin coughed blood, his law flickering wildly as Spartan's flames burned through his defenses. From the inside, the assassin screamed. Spartan raised his other hand. Spartan's raised hand came down. It was a punch. The fist crashed into the assassin's face with a sound like stone, shattering. The ground beneath them ruptured, cracks racing outward as the assassin's head snapped back unnaturally. Before the body could even fall, Spartan punched again. And again. Each blow landed with absolute precision, black flames detonating inward instead of outward, forcing their way past the assassin's outer body. The assassin tried to scream. The fourth punch caved in his chest. The fifth erased what remained of his head. By the sixth, there was nothing left. Only then did he stop. He released his hand, and ash drifted downward. Spartan stood upright, his damaged torso still smoldering black. Flames stabilizing around the wound as his body began its slow regeneration. His expression never changed. "Master's blood is truly something," he said with something that sounded akin to awe but flat. He turned his head. Across the battlefield, Fade's massive mantis form was locked in combat with the remaining assassin. Shadow and steel collided repeatedly, scythes flashing as blades of darkness were torn apart mid-flight. Spartan stepped forward. The ground cracked beneath his foot. Fade sensed him immediately. The mantis shifted its stance, herding the assassin backward without words. The assassin realized it at the same time. His breathing hitched. Two monsters. He tried to retreat into the void again. Spartan vanished. The assassin reappeared a heartbeat later and Spartan was already there. A single punch landed in the assassin's abdomen, black flames erupting inward and detonating his body from the inside out. Fade's scythes came down a fraction of a second later, cleaving through what remained. The body split, then dissolved. Silence followed. Spartan straightened and turned away without a glance at the remains. Fade's massive form folded inward, shadows collapsing as it returned to concealment, its task complete. Both undead turned back toward the battlefield. /N. Happy seasonal greetings, everyone. Chapter 734, Another Attack? Meanwhile, in another location, a head emerged from the ground. It was Michael. After using the Earth Escape skill to enter the ground, he went as far as possible from the battlefield. The feeling of skipping death too many times in such a short while was terrible to Michael. Who were those people attacking me? Though he asked the question in confusion, Michael was almost sure of who they were. The demonic supernaturals. Even if they weren't the ones, Michael would rather believe they were the ones. Unfortunately, though he burned with rage, it wasn't enough to cloud his mind. Fortunately, my body was strong enough to resist and no one chased me after. However, Michael had only finished muttering this when he heard a voice. I've seen a lot of skills, but this is the first time I've seen a master rank do such a skill. What's the name of your skill? Michael did not bother to turn around. The moment the voice reached his ears, he knew one thing. In times when one was in a place that felt weird, the quickest solution was to leave that place. Michael decided he was going to run instead. Michael sank deeper into the earth as he activated Earth Escape again. The soil parted beneath him, layers of rock and compacted. Stone peeling aside as his body slipped through. Then he felt it. The earth hardened. It locked up around him as if a will had been forced into the ground itself, compressing it, stiffening every grain of soil into something closer to metal than stone. Michael's breath hitched. If he stopped now, he would be trapped. If he hesitated, his body would be crushed where he was. His jaw clenched. Pain flared through his chest and arms as he forced more mana into the technique, muscles screaming as the resistance multiplied. His wounds throbbed violently, blood seeping freely now as the pressure scraped against his already damaged body. Damn it! He pushed anyway. The resistance spiked, but fortunately in a competition of elements, there weren't a lot of people that could compete with Michael. Seeing Michael gain advantage, Michael noticed the control around the earth he was trapped in loosen a bit, and he took advantage of it. It seems whoever was controlling it had not expected him to be able to do something. Michael forced himself forward, tearing through the hardened earth by sheer stubborn will. His senses blurred for a second, and his body felt like it was being dragged across blades, but he broke through the obstruction. A heartbeat later, the ground above him shook violently. Punch landed. The earth behind him exploded inward, shockwaves rippling through the underground layers as whatever had tried to stop him struck too late. Stone shattered, pressure collapsed, and the space Michael had occupied was obliterated. But he was already gone. Michael did not slow. He reversed direction mid-escape, twisting through the soil and rock, forcing his battered body to move back toward the battlefield he had just abandoned. It is said the most dangerous place could also be the safest. Pain followed Michael every step of the way, and the more he moved, the greater the feeling of weakness consumed him. His lungs burned. Blood stained the earth in his wake. But he did not stop. If he stayed underground, they would corner him eventually. If he surfaced elsewhere, he would be hunted alone. The battlefield, chaotic as it was still safer. At least there were much stronger people there, and even if they didn't help him, Michael's strongest undead just happened to be there. 2. If it was the other way around, Michael would have stood his ground a bit more while thinking of other solutions, but even though he had his other undead with him, even he could not beat them, and before he could even summon them, Michael didn't have the confidence he'd be able to hold on for a few seconds before the number sufficient to protect him would appear. Several thoughts flashed through his mind, but Michael did not stop moving. If anything, as the feeling of weakness increased, so did his effort. High above the battlefield, far from where Michael tore through the earth, a figure in gray robes streaked across the sky like a falling star. His movement was violent and erratic. Each time he descended, he slammed his fist into the ground. Boom! The impact cracked the earth in precise geometric patterns, lines of force spreading outward before sinking back into the stone. He rose again immediately, only to descend once more at a different angle. Boom! Again. Boom! Each strike was deliberate, as if he were tracing something unseen into the terrain itself. Damn it! The man cursed, his voice sharp with irritation. His hood fell back slightly, revealing a pale, sharp-featured face twisted in frustration. This was the same man who had stood beside Brian not long ago. Now, there was nothing amusing about this. "You really deserve to die," he muttered, fingers digging into the air as if he could seize something intangible. "You and the rest of these pests that can't do their job right." His original plan had been simple. Bring the demon lord up to the first floor. Use its presence to drown the races here in despair. Let chaos weaken them. Then harvest the survivors. But when he had tested the waters, exchanging only a brief clash with the races of this floor, he had felt it immediately. Danger. If he focused entirely on the demon lord, his so-called grand plan could very well die on this very floor. That realization had forced him to adjust. Using the authority and presence of the demon lord, he had reached downward, calling rank 3 demons from the lower floors. It should have been enough. It should have been overwhelming. Yet now, his gaze darkened. "That kid," he growled. "What kind of monster grows like that?" And as if that were not enough, there was also that unexpected rank. For on the opposing side, too many variables. The man clenched his fist, veins bulging as mana surged around him. "My plans keep changing," he said coldly. "And I hate that." Unfortunately, reality was beyond his means to control. A while later, Michael burst upward. The ground split as he emerged near the edge of the battlefield, debris spraying outward as he rolled across broken stone and forced himself upright. His vision swam for a moment, then stabilized. Explosions filled the air. Undead clashed with demons. Flames and several other spells tore through the sky. Michael steadied himself, planting his spear he now had in his left hand into the ground as he took a breath that felt like fire. Only then did he glance back. Nothing followed him out. Michael wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. "Coward," he muttered. But even as he said it, he knew better. The moment Michael was struck out of the sky, for an instant it was as if the war itself stuttered. Even the old man fighting at the center of the battlefield felt it. His expression darkened. That strike had been meant to kill. Several demons howled in triumph when they did not sense any life. From the ground, their formation surged forward, confidence flaring for the first time in minutes. But unfortunately they were immediately met with confusion when they saw the undead were even fighting with more strength. Time passed, and the battle had already reached its end when Michael appeared at the corner of the battlefield. Michael did not bother hiding his presence as the last demon was killed. Hostile intent surged toward him from multiple directions, and several attacks converged on him at once. Before Michael could even open his mouth, a heavy pressure slammed down in front of him. Boom! A barrier of condensed air flared to life as the old man stepped. Between Michael and the incoming strikes, the attacks shattered against his defense, exploding outward in bursts of distorted, scattered energy. The ground cracked beneath his feet, but he did not move an inch. Silence followed. The old man turned slowly to look at Michael. His gaze lingered. His eyes swept over Michael from head to toe, the torn coat, the dried blood, the dirt and scorch marks clinging to him. Despite how ruined Michael looked, despite the blood and the damage, there were no visible injuries, no broken limbs, no torn flesh, nothing that matched the amount of force Michael looked like he had passed through. And then the confusion set in. "You?" the old man said, his brows furrowed. For a brief moment, something odd flickered across his face. Then it smoothed away, replaced by his usual composure. "Are you all right?" he asked. *n. Happy seasonal greetings to everyone. Just 7 more days to the end of the year, and a year of continued support from everyone reading this. I appreciate you all so much. Chapter 735, 3 Race. Michael opened his mouth before the old man could say anything else. "I was attacked again," he said. That single sentence drew the attention of everyone who was hearing him. The silver-haired elder descended at once, her body cutting through the air like a falling blade before landing beside the old man. "Again?" she asked. Several nearby experts turned fully toward him now. "Who attacked you?" the old man asked. Michael shook his head. "I don't know," he said truthfully. "I didn't stay long enough to find out. They were stronger than me. Much stronger. I ran as fast as I could. That was all. No exaggeration. Just a plain statement of fact." The silver-haired elder's gaze sharpened as she studied him. The others did the same. And that was where the strangeness of his appearance crept in. Michael looked terrible. His coat was torn and destroyed in several places. Dirt and dried blood clung to his clothes. His mana was unstable, and his complexion was pale. Yet, there were no fatal wounds. No signs of someone who had barely escaped death at the hands of a superior expert. That contradiction made the silence stretch. Michael could only sigh helplessly in his mind. He had truly been roughed up lately. Unfortunately, his body refused to cooperate with that image. Even now, after everything he had been through, there were no crushed organs, no shattered bones, no lingering structural damage that matched the situation he experienced. With his current constitution, if Michael still looked terrible after being given even a short window to recover, then the damage he had taken must have been extreme. Severe enough to harm a body that the Awakener system itself had already acknowledged as standing on the threshold of godhood. The silver-haired elder continued speaking. "Did they pursue you?" she asked. Michael shook his head again. "No. They tried to stop me from escaping, but they were too slow." That answer only deepened the strangeness. Too slow. Several experts exchanged looks, especially the Amazari and Stonekin elders. The moment Michael tore through the sky with nothing but his own body replayed itself in their minds with uncomfortable clarity. They had seen him pursue teleportation itself, breaking through sound barriers one after another, the air detonating behind him as his body forced its way forward. Aside from the Amazari Elder, there were not many rank 3 supernaturals present who could confidently claim they were faster than that. And that was the disturbing part. Michael was still only rank 2. With his foundation, how strong would he be when he advanced? The elders did not think this was the boy's peak. Even if he later couldn't find the law that suited him and followed another's path, he'd still be much stronger than ordinary rank 3. Among the other races, the looks directed at him changed when some started to recognize him. The old man noticed the shift immediately. He cleared his throat. "That," he said calmly, his voice carrying without effort, "is a discussion for later." The pressure in the air eased slightly as his words settled. "For now," he continued, "we still have matters to conclude." As if on cue, the atmosphere rippled. 3 figures descended from above. They were the leaders, or rather the ones with the highest authority among the 3 races in the 15th floor currently available right now. All 3 turned their attention toward Michael. Their gazes lingered on him as Michael himself also studied them as well. There were 3 major races operating openly on the 15th floor of Hell. Aside from the elves, there were 2 other races present. The first were the Karveth. A fully humanoid race at first glance, the Karveth were immediately recognizable by their 4 arms, arranged in 2 powerful pairs. Their skin ranged from muted bronze to deep stone gray. The Karveth were classified as neutral pragmatic. Across the universe, they were known as mercenaries and contract-bound enforcers. They did not fight for ideals or emotions. They fought for outcomes. If a battlefield promised profit, survival, or strategic advantage, the Karveth would be there. Once contracted, however, they were notoriously reliable. Betrayal was considered a cultural disgrace among them. The second race drew far more attention despite their smaller frames. They were the Varelian. Shorter in stature, the Varelian possessed compact purple wings formed from dense, crystalline feathers. Their bodies were slender, with smooth skin that carried an unnatural luster. The Varelian can be said to be a neutral race with incredible talent. With several rare elements, but thanks to the low numbers, which was mostly caused by hunting, as their entire body consisted of treasures rare in the universe, they were quite an aggressive race. One could say they evolved to become that due to their surroundings. The silence that followed was broken first by the Karveth. The 4-armed figure stepped forward half a pace, all 4 palms coming together in a sharp, resounding clap that cut through lingering tension like a hammer strike. "You have our thanks," he said loudly, his voice deep and carrying, unbothered by the eyes now turning toward him. "Had you not disrupted the demon formation when you did, the losses on this floor would have doubled. At the very least, after all this is done, we'll love your presence in our territory to give proper thanks." He looked to the others that came to help as well and said something similar. There was no flowery praise, just a blunt acknowledgement of value. That alone spoke volumes about the Karveth. Next came the Varelian, who gave a similar thanks but on a more detached level. Then, finally, the elves. The elven representative was tall even by elven standards, her figure slender without appearing fragile. Long hair the color of moonlit silver flowed freely down her back. Her skin was pale and smooth with the marks of battle on her. Instead of affecting her beauty, it instead gave her a rough elegance. Her eyes were what held Michael's attention. They were a muted green, calm and clear, with no visible ripple of emotion within them. No admiration, no hostility. The only thing he could sense well was the curiosity her eyes held. The elf finally spoke. "Are you a half-elf?" Chapter 736 Suspicion. "Are you a half-elf?" The question landed lightly, but the effect it had was anything but. For a brief moment, the surrounding experts turned almost in unison, their gazes snapping back to Michael as if they were only now truly seeing him. Michael's long black hair had come loose at some point during the battle, no longer bound or restrained, flowing freely down his back in a dark cascade that reached past his shoulders. It was thick and smooth. His skin, though marked by dirt and dried blood, was unblemished beneath it. If anything, it was smoother than most elves present. His features were sharp but balanced, neither overly human nor distinctly elven, resting in an uncanny middle ground. His eyes were a vivid green, carrying a vitality that felt alive. There was something natural about him, something that made mana in the air subtly lean toward him without conscious intent. It was subtle, but to those sensitive enough it was unmistakable. Nature favored him. The old man frowned. He knew Michael was from Aurora. And yet, as he observed him now, a thought surfaced unbidden. If someone told him this boy was the illegitimate child of an elven royal, he might not dismiss it outright. A bastard born of a high-ranking elven bloodline. It would explain far too much. No wonder the elf had felt compelled to ask. Michael, for his part, could only let out a confused look. "No," he said at last. "I'm human." The elf studied him for another long moment. Her green eyes lingered, curiosity deepening rather than fading. Then she nodded slowly, as if accepting the answer while still reserving judgment. "I see," she said, but the way she said it made it very clear. She did not see at all. Could not be helped. Others who did not hold the knowledge of elves might really see Michael as just a very exceptional human, but it was a bit of a different story in the universe. If Michael had long ears, he would look even more like an elf than an actual elf. The elf did not look away. "Then," she said slowly, "are you a holy child of your race?" A ripple spread instantly. Those who had merely been curious before now stared at Michael in earnest. A holy child. Among the races, that title was not symbolic. It was not poetic exaggeration. It referred to beings acknowledged by their race, by the world itself, as perfect creations. Individuals born in a span of 1,000,000 years, sometimes longer. Existences that embodied the essence of their species so completely that the laws of the world bent ever so slightly to accommodate them. And once the thought was raised, it became difficult to dismiss. They remembered Michael standing a full rank below and yet commanding multiple rank 3 undead without backlash. They remembered his foundation absurdly stable. Michael felt his confusion deepen. He knew what a race's holy child was. He had read about them. They were legends wrapped in reality. Monsters wearing the skin of prodigies. Beings so far removed from normal standards that comparing them to ordinary talents was meaningless. But him? Yes, he knew he was not normal. He had accepted that long ago. Yet when he thought of figures like Rin, of those who truly stood outside the framework of reason, Michael could not help but feel that he still carried an air of normalcy. At least, compared to them, right? He opened his mouth to answer. Before a single word could leave it, the old man's leg struck the ground lightly. The sound was soft, but the effect was immediate. "That is enough," the old man said, his voice firm, carrying authority that brooked no argument. "You are asking too many questions of a young man who has already done more than his share today." The pressure in the air subtly shifted. The gazes lingering on Michael withdrew, one by one, though not without reluctance. The elf met the old man's eyes for a brief moment, then inclined her head in acceptance. She did not argue, but the curiosity in her gaze did not fade. Michael exhaled quietly. What he did not know was that the old man was also confused. Outwardly, the elder remained calm, but inside his thoughts were no longer calm. He knew the present holy child of Aurora. That child was a symbol, a pillar, an existence raised and protected. From the moment the signs appeared, and compared to that holy child, Michael still had a gap, a clear gap. The old man could admit that much without hesitation. But when he thought about it deeper, the gap was not absurd. Not the kind of gap that should exist between a holy child and a so-called talented youth. It was a gap that could be bridged, a gap that could shrink, a gap that, in certain situations, might not even matter. And that was what disturbed him. Confusion filled the old man's mind like cold water. Because if this boy could stand here as a rank 2, bruised, exhausted, and still radiating that unnatural vitality, still commanding rank 3 undead like they were extensions of his own body, then what would he look like as a rank 3? What would he become after another breakthrough? A wild thought surfaced, a thought he immediately tried to crush. Aurora could not possibly have another holy child. The old man's thoughts grew stronger. No, this could not be allowed to spiral. If Michael truly was something close to that title, then the worst thing possible was leaving him to grow in the dark, unrestrained, unexamined, without guidance. A holy child without a leash was a calamity. A holy child without grooming was a weapon waiting to be stolen or used against the race. The old man's gaze flicked briefly to Michael again, sharper than anyone noticed. Then he made a decision, quiet and absolute. This boy must be watched by the Federation, properly and closely, and if needed, groomed. Chapter 737. Yet another surprise. No one knew what the others were thinking, but on the surface they were all in the same boat. The four-armed Karveth leader moved again. "There is one matter that must be addressed," he said, his deep voice steady. "When you reappeared earlier, our forces reacted on instinct. You were struck before your identity was confirmed." His four eyes fixed on Michael without hostility. "That attack was not born of malice. Only caution. Still, responsibility remains." He brought his four palms together once more. "For that, I offer an apology on behalf of the Karveth." Michael shook his head lightly. "I understand," he said. "Given the situation, I would have done the same." The tension eased another fraction. The Karveth leader nodded, seemingly satisfied, then turned slightly to face the old man. His posture straightened, his expression serious. "Elder," he said, his voice carrying clearly despite the fatigue weighing on him. "Thank you for your assistance today." The old man looked at him. "If not for you," the Karveth continued, "and your intervention, the losses on this floor would have been massive. I doubt many of us would still be standing." The old man nodded at his words. "You did your part as well," he replied calmly. Before the exchange could settle further, the elf stepped forward. "Gratitude is deserved," she said, "but we should not mistake survival for victory." Her gaze swept across the battlefield. Corpses littered the ground. The air was thick with residual mana and scorched earth. Exhaustion clung to every living presence. "We survived this crisis," she continued. "That much is true. But this does not mean it is over. In fact, it may not have truly begun." A subtle tension returned to the air. "Until now," she said, "the demon lord has not appeared." Several experts stiffened at this. "If it were to emerge now," the elf went on evenly, "then aside from the elder here and Michael's undead, most of us are in no condition to fight." She did not exaggerate. Mana reserves were low. Injuries were everywhere. Even the strongest among them had been pushed close to their limits. "We are standing," she said, "but we are not ready." The Karveth leader did not flinch at her warning. "You speak as if numbers were ever our method," he said, his voice still loud and blunt. "We have never depended on crowding a demon lord to death." The elf's eyes narrowed slightly, but she did not immediately refute him. The Varelian leader stepped in. They were a gender-neutral race. When it was time to populate, the one with the more dominant structure would become male. This was why their race appeared both male and female within the same small humanoid body. When the Varelian spoke, their voice was calmer than the Karveth's, but a cold urgency threaded every word. "Endurance is not our problem," the Varelian said. "Time is. What we need is to find the demon lord and end it quickly, before it gathers numbers again like it did now." Several experts tensed. The Varelian continued. "If it is allowed even a short window, it will rebuild its formation. It might pull more demons upward and repeat the chaos we just survived. Every moment we waste here delays something else." The elf's gaze shifted. The Karveth leader's four eyes narrowed. "There is also the issue of the lower floors," the Varelian said. "We need to resolve this quickly, so we can find out what happened and prevent another possible catastrophe based on the situation. If we delay too long, we will be forced to ask for help from our home realm." A heavy silence followed. This issue involved every race present. Could not be taken lightly. As for asking for help, they already had. The fact that no one had arrived yet only showed how difficult it was to send more powerful individuals into the higher floors. The old man listened without interruption. When the Varelian finished, the elder's gaze swept across them all. "You do not need to worry so much," he said at last. "As the Karveth has said, we are not without power to battle a demon lord. Putting everything else aside, the Drakeblood race has someone like me on the early floors as well. Someone already searching for the demon lord. If we group up," the old man went on, "then we can surely resolve this matter." He glanced toward the horizon, as if he could already see the path they needed to take. "What we need now is simple. We find the demon lord." However, the old man had barely finished speaking when it came. A terrifying energy surged in the distance, followed by a thunderous roar. Several experts stiffened instantly. Even Michael's undead, scattered across the battlefield, reacted. The old man's expression did not change, but the calm in his eyes deepened into something colder before he vanished. The Karveth leader turned his head toward the others, then toward the old man's last position. "Do you all know what I am thinking?" he asked. Without waiting for a reply, he continued. "The demon lord has appeared, and based on that roar," his gaze narrowed, "it is probably an elder of the Drakeblood race. If it truly was a Drakeblood elder, then with the old man present, they should be able to resolve it." That was what everyone thought. Even so, none of them hesitated. They had survived too much to trust in assumptions alone. A demon lord was not something anyone wanted to leave to two people if they could help it. However, before they could move, everybody on the battlefield stiffened. Michael's instincts screamed before his eyes even followed. He looked up. Two figures hovered high in the air. No, three. Could not be helped. Among the three, two felt like suns. "What in the heavens is going on?" someone muttered. Yes, it was yet another group of suppressed rank 4. And the third figure, their aura was familiar. It was the one who had chased him earlier. Chapter 738 Smell of Death 1. The three figures hovered high above the battlefield, unmoving. The pressure two of them radiated bent the air around them, warping mana into visible ripples. Even without releasing their full aura, their presence alone forced weaker beings to struggle for breath. The first of the two was tall and slender, his proportions refined rather than bulky, yet every inch of his body carried restrained power. His skin was a deep bronze, smooth and unmarred. His long dark hair was tied behind his back, and his brown eyes burned with a quiet, absolute certainty. The second son stood beside him. Unlike the bronze-skinned man, this figure was broad-shouldered and imposing, his body built like a living fortress. Black scaled markings traced across his neck and arms, half organic and half draconic. Horn-like ridges curved backward from his temples, and faint wisps of heat distorted the air around him with every slow breath. His eyes glowed a dull crimson. This one did not hide his dominance. Just standing there, he felt like a looming catastrophe waiting for permission to descend. Then there was the third. He hovered slightly behind the other two, his presence far less explosive. He wore simple gray robes that fluttered gently despite the lack of wind. His face was fully visible and uncovered, plain in a way that made it difficult to remember specific features. Black hair, dark eyes, pale skin, human. At least he looked human. Michael's heart sank the moment his gaze locked onto him. He recognized that aura. It was the same one that had chased him earlier. Before anyone else could speak, the silver-haired Amazari elder reacted. Her eyes widened, fury flashing across her composed features. "You!" she shouted, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "Why are you with them?" Her gaze burned into the bronze-skinned man. "Of all people, you dare show yourself here?" Murmurs erupted instantly. Several experts stiffened, their expressions darkening as recognition spread. Apparently, this was a former Amazari who had been exiled and branded a criminal. The silver-haired elder's voice shook with restrained anger. "You were exiled," she said. "Your crimes alone warranted erasure. Am not surprised you would commit further evil, but to involve yourself in the affairs of hell." Her eyes narrowed. "To take part in this plan?" The bronze-skinned man did not react with anger. He He smiled faintly. "To achieve peace," he said calmly, his voice smooth and unhurried. "Sacrifices are sometimes necessary." The words landed heavily. Several experts clenched their fists. "Peace?" the Amazari elder snapped. "You call this peace?" She gestured at the battlefield, at the corpses, the ruin, the scorched land. "You call slaughter peace?" The man's brown eyes did not waver. "Peace is not the absence of death," he replied. A chill ran through the crowd. Across the known realms, the Amazari were recognized as a matriarchal civilization, one where leadership, inheritance, and authority naturally fell to women. It was not enforced through oppression or artificial law, but through reality itself. Amazari females were, on average, stronger than their male counterparts. In battle, in governance, and in comprehension of power, they simply excelled. Their society was built around this truth. Their laws were strict, refined over countless eras, and designed to prevent stagnation or tyranny. Male Amazari were not slaves, nor were they oppressed. They held positions of influence and served AST commanders, scholars, and administrators. Yet the highest authority always rested with the women, because history had proven time and time again that they were better suited to wield it. But even in a society built on balance and logic, resentment could still grow. Perfection did not erase ambition. There were always those who believed the order itself was flawed. Those who believed strength should be seized, not inherited. The bronze-skinned man was one of them. Long ago, he had been a prodigy among the Amazari, a rank for who rose faster than most, whose talent rivaled even the matriarchs of his generation, and he hated the nature of his realm. He believed the Amazari were shackled by tradition, that their matriarchal order was not balance but stagnation disguised as harmony, that the males of the race were deliberately held back, their potential sacrifice to preserve a system that no longer deserved to exist. So he gathered followers, ambitious Amazari men who shared his belief, those who felt overlooked, those who wanted to reshape their race in their own image. At first they called it reform, then necessity. By the time the Amazari Council realized what was happening, the movement had already become a threat. He was condemned to exile. His name was stripped from Amazari records. His existence declared a taboo. The silver-haired elder's voice trembled with contained fury. "You dare speak of peace?" The bronze-skinned man met her gaze evenly. "I dared to dream of a future where power was not decided at birth," he said, "where strength mattered more than tradition." He looked down at the battlefield again. Change is never clean. The silence that followed was heavy. The second sun exhaled slowly, heat rippling outward. The draconic pressure intensified for a brief moment, enough to force even rank 3 experts to brace themselves. Michael felt his undead tense instinctively. Only the gray-robed man remained silent. His gaze drifted lazily across the battlefield before settling on Michael. Their eyes met. Michael's blood ran cold. The man smiled with mockery. The situation had changed. Badly. 2 suppressed rank 4. And the third was someone who already knew him. Whatever was unfolding now was no longer just about a demon lord. The bronze-skinned Amazari finally spoke again, his voice carrying effortlessly across the battlefield. "Do not misunderstand us," he said calmly. "We did not come here to shed blood." His gaze swept over the gathered experts, the wounded, the undead, the ruined land. "If everyone present knows their place," he continued, "and acts with obedience, then there will be no need for further conflict. All of you will do well. You will survive. You will even benefit." Before he could finish his next sentence, the silver-haired Amazari elder laughed. "In your dreams," she said. Chapter 739, Smell of Death 2. As this was a matter concerning their race, it was obvious they would not have agreed to whatever the Amazari rank for superpower was saying. However, there was a difference between naturally refusing a person and rudely refusing them. Aside from the Amazari elder, who was livid with rage, and Michael, who was overstimulated by the sensation of death once again, which made it unsurprising that he could not fully maintain his composure beneath his calm exterior. Since he had only been a supernatural for a limited time and had not spent years refining his will like others at his stage, the people around them were thinking of ways to escape this situation alive with minimal casualties. Even the battle-natured Karveth were using their minds to the fullest extent of their capabilities. Unfortunately, the moment the silver-haired elder spoke the way she did, everyone immediately knew it was over. The atmosphere changed as the bronze male Amazari raised a hand, and the invisible pressure pressing down on everyone increased. Surprisingly, the first person to make a move was neither the silver-haired Amazari elder, nor the Stonekin, nor the three leaders of the three races on the 15th floor, but Michael. Before he had appeared in public a while ago, using the damaged coffin of the Forgotten, he had collected Blue and Purple, who guarded him closely in the land of origin, back into his original body. They might not have possessed destructive power like most of his undead, but in terms of self-preservation, thanks to their illusion abilities, they were among the best. The instant the silver-haired elder spoke, Michael, who now had Blue and Purple resting as earrings on him, made a move. Blue's law was called the Law of Reflected Reality, which was connected to the greater law of light. With this law, Blue could project mirror realities around itself, turning perception into a tangible force. Every illusion was a reflection of belief. The more a target believed, the stronger the illusion became. To put it simply, the law inverted perception. What looked fake became real, and what looked real became illusion. Purple's law was the law of false manifestation, which was related to the greater law of reality. This law allowed Purple to create illusions that interacted physically for a few seconds. To see was to summon, and what one perceived, even falsely, gained existence. The best part was that these two laws could be used together, and when they were used together, they created a qualitative change due to the extreme harmony they shared. This harmony was exactly what Michael took advantage of. Before anyone could properly react to the shift in pressure, the mana around Michael stirred unnaturally as mist rolled out from beneath his feet. Visibility dropped rapidly as the fog thickened, swallowing the lower half of the battlefield in a pale, drifting veil. The bronze-skinned Amazari's eyes narrowed. At the same time, the mist around Michael condensed. Thin shapes began to form within the fog, elongated and sharp, their outlines barely visible until they fully emerged. Dozens of narrow spears took shape. They hovered for a single heartbeat, then they shot forward. The mist spears screamed through the air in a sudden barrage, cutting toward the three figures in the sky from multiple angles at once. The gray-robed man moved first. His eyes flashed as he stepped backward through the air, his figure blurring as he slipped cleanly between two incoming spears. The others passed through where he had been moments before, dispersing harmlessly into fog. His face twisted in irritation when he realized he had dodged an attack that couldn't have harmed him. TCH. He looked down sharply, his gaze piercing the mist as if trying to locate Michael's exact position. His aura flared slightly, irritated rather than threatened. The bronze-skinned Amazari, on the other hand, did not evade. He reached out calmly and caught one of the mist spears mid-flight. His fingers closed around it without resistance. The Amazari's eyes flickered with interest. He turned the mist spear slowly in his hand, examining it as if it were a curious artifact rather than an attack. Beside him, the draconic figure did the same. A second mist spear slammed into his chest and stopped cold, hovering against his scaled skin. He reached out and grabbed it with one massive hand, his crimson eyes narrowing as heat rippled faintly around his fingers. The spear trembled but did not immediately disperse. The draconic man laughed quietly. "This is interesting," he said, his voice low and rumbling. "It is not real, but it is not nothing either." The bronze-skinned Amazari turned the mist spear once more between his fingers, then let it dissolve into vapor. His expression remained calm, almost amused. "A neat application," he said casually. The bronze-skinned Amazari chuckled softly. "If my senses do not deceive me, this seems to have come from a youth down there, but considering that I did not sense the blessing of the universe on him, He should be below the stage where he can use universal truths, he said, his voice light. This is impressive. The draconic figure's lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. And he is doing something, he said. Even now. The bronze-skinned man's eyes narrowed slightly. I know, he said, as they were currently in a suppressed state combined with the nature of the mist. They could not read everything clearly through it, but they could tell something was happening within. The bronze-skinned Amazari lifted one hand. His law stirred, and a breeze moved across the battlefield. Gentle breeze, the bronze-skinned man said softly. The air obeyed. It rolled outward in a wide arc, passing through the mist. The fog rippled, trembled, and then tore apart like thin cloth. In a few seconds, the battlefield was clear. The mist was gone. The bronze-skinned Amazari looked down calmly, expecting to see fear and hatred in the eyes of the people below at the sight of their power. Instead, he froze. Chapter 740 Smell of Death 3. His eyes widened by a fraction. Even the draconic figure's casual expression shifted. Below them, the ground was filled with rank 3 creatures. They stood shoulder to shoulder across the battlefield, packed in dense clusters like a prepared army. Many were undead, and they numbered over 200. They also came in many strange shapes, as the two sons even saw some massive beast-like forms, including one with a huge body and a trunk for a nose. When combined with the surviving experts and the rank 3 creatures that had already been present before, the number rose to something obscene. More than 300 rank 3 creatures. All of them looking up. All of them staring at the 3 figures in the sky. The bronze-skinned Amazari's gaze swept across the mass slowly, disbelief written plainly across his face. It was not only the two sons who were in disbelief. The experts below were as well. Earlier, when the mist spread, those hovering above could only see the surface shift. The environment below had changed, but not enough to blind those standing within it. They could still see each other. They could still speak. And that was why, when Michael moved, every gaze turned to him in the same instant. Confusion came first. Then fear swallowed the confusion whole as multiple undead began appearing around Michael. And they were all rank 3. The Karveth leader's eyes widened slightly as he tried to process what he was seeing. Since when did rank 3 become so cheap? The Varelian leader's crystalline wings trembled, emotions and thoughts breaking through her calm exterior. When the number crossed 100, the battlefield fell into a silence that was almost nauseating. And Michael, the rank 2 youth, stood at the center of everyone's attention. The elven representative remained still, her face composed. But inside her, she was filled with stimulation. All her earlier doubts shattered without sound. Holy child? This question no longer mattered. If someone stood before her now and tried to claim this youth was not a holy child, she would view them the same way she would view a liar trying to sell sand in a desert. A fool. Or worse, someone trying to take her for a fool. The bronze-skinned Amazari stared down at the battlefield. First, it was just disbelief. Then his gaze sharpened. He looked past the mass of rank 3 undead, past the experts, past the scattered corpses and broken land, and locked onto the one detail that mattered. Michael. The youth stood there like a core, and everything else revolved around him. Literally, the bronze-skinned man could see it. A thin, invisible web of connection stretching from Michael's presence to every undead on the field. It was subtle, but it existed. And to someone at his level, subtlety was not concealment. It was simply another layer waiting to be peeled back. His expression twitched. Then it broke. The calm that had defined him since his arrival shattered like glass. His aura surged. The mana around him convulsed as if struck by a hammer. The battlefield below groaned beneath the sudden increase in pressure. Several wounded experts coughed blood on the spot. Even some rank 3 beings staggered, forced to brace themselves to remain standing. The draconic figure beside him narrowed his crimson eyes, but did not move. The gray-robed man's smile faded by a fraction, interest replacing mockery. The bronze-skinned Amazari's voice erupted across the battlefield, sharp and cold. So this is what it is. His eyes burned as he looked down at them all. His gaze swept across the gathered races, and then he laughed with contempt. Amazing. His tone rose. I offer you mercy. I offer you a path to live. And you repay my kindness by thinking my restraint is weakness? His face twisted, fury spilling out openly now. You became brave because I did not crush you immediately? He pointed downward, his arm cutting through the air with absolute certainty. Against me? His voice thundered. Me? The last word echoed across the surrounding area like a slap to the laws themselves. A heavy silence followed, but it was not the silence of submission. The people below realized at the same moment that there would be no negotiation. The bronze-skinned Amazari's gaze snapped back to Michael. His anger concentrated. Then he smiled. A thin, vicious line. You. The word landed like a verdict. You are the root. He lifted his hand. The air around his palm compressed into a razor-thin line of force so dense that the space around it distorted. It was as if the atmosphere itself had been folded and sharpened into a weapon. His voice dropped, calm returning in the most terrifying way. Since you want to pretend you can stand against me, his eyes narrowed. We will begin with you. He pointed directly at Michael, and the world screamed. A concentrated beam of air shot downward. The air split. Space rippled. The beam tore toward Michael like an executioner's blade. For a heartbeat, Michael's mind went blank. Death. The same cold taste he had felt earlier crawled up his spine, squeezing his heart. Then something moved. The bond between him and his undead flared like a wire pulled tight. The rank 3 undead closest to him reacted before anyone else could even inhale. Several bodies surged forward at once, throwing themselves into the path of the beam without hesitation. A wall of flesh, bone, armor. The beam struck. Boom. The impact detonated. The ground beneath them cracked in a spiderweb pattern, exploding outward in a ring of shattered stone. A shockwave rolled across the battlefield, flinging debris into the air like rain. The first undead was cut cleanly in half. The second was bisected. The third was torn apart so violently that fragments of bone and dark armor sprayed like shrapnel. But the beam slowed, just slightly, and in that tiny window Michael vanished from where he stood. A blur of motion as he forced his body into a desperate, evasive step. His coat snapping, his hair whipping back, his eyes wide and focused. The beam carved past him. It did not miss by much. It sliced a deep trench into the earth behind him, the cut so smooth it looked unnatural, as if the ground had been peeled open. For a moment the battlefield froze. The bronze-skinned Amazari lowered his hand slowly. His expression was still twisted with anger, but now something else flickered in his eyes. Pleasure. He looked down at Michael again. His voice carried, cold and absolute. Run again. A faint smile tugged at his lips. I want to see how many of your toys can die before you finally understand what obedience means. Chapter 741 Smell of Death. 4. Michael remembered a sentence his instructor once told him. There is a price for everything. Maybe this was his. As the pain of losing several strong undead in an extremely short moment tormented and tore at Michael's soul, he could not help but think that maybe, if he were just some average person somewhere, he would not be here. He probably would not. As Michael's body trembled in pain, the others around him were not slow to react. The first to attack were Michael's undead. Lucky, whom Michael had kept away due to his poison attribute potentially causing friendly fire, was nowhere to be seen as Michael went out. In the next instant, Lucky leapt into the air as he morphed into his true form. A huge 8-meter-tall wolf with dragon-like wings longer than its body. Lucky let out a loud roar that made every rank 3 present, aside from the 2 sons, shift in place. The dragon-like figure among the 2 sons began paying more attention, as if something had finally caught his interest, and indeed something had. That something was Lucky, thanks to his pure thin dragon bloodline. It turned out the dragon-like figure was actually a drake blood, and thanks to their dragon bloodline, absorbing things related to dragons or advancing in rank caused their thin bloodline to grow stronger. This was why, at rank 3, they could already morph into drakes. It was said that at rank 5, they resembled true dragons even more. The draconic figure let out a low chuckle, heat rippling faintly around his massive frame. His crimson eyes locked onto Lucky as the massive undead wolf spread its wings, poison-tinged mana rolling off its body in heavy waves. "Leave that one to me," the drake blood said. "I want it." The bronze-skinned Amazari did not even glance at him. "I am not concerned with your entertainment," he replied flatly. "Take it if you wish." His gaze never left the battlefield below. "Our task here was simple," he continued, his tone cold and dismissive. "Stall them. But it seems they cannot comprehend the immensity of the power standing before them." He gestured vaguely at the army of undead, at the gathered experts, at the races staring up at them with defiance mixed with fear. "A few deaths will be instructive," he went on calmly. "Necessary, even." His lips curled. "Especially that boy." Below, Michael's breathing was ragged. The backlash of losing multiple rank 3 undead tore through his mind like hooks dragging across his soul. The bond had been severed violently, not gently released. Pain lanced through him in waves, sharp enough to blur his vision. The sight of this, combined with the connection he shared with his undead, made them aware of the pain their master felt, driving them into madness. It was instinct rather than emotion, something still foreign even to undead whose intelligence could begin mimicking such reactions. It was like a mother throwing herself in front of a car to shield her child, or a father exchanging his life for his offspring without a second thought. The role of an undead was to serve its master. It was their life purpose. The drake blood did not wait. The moment Lucky's roar rolled across the battlefield, the draconic figure's aura shifted, and the air around him grew heavy with heat. The horn-like ridges along his temples flared faintly, then his body expanded. In the span of a breath, the sky was filled by a drake. 15 meters tall, thick-necked and brutal, with wings that blotted out the light and a tail that whipped through the air like a weapon. The space around him trembled. His crimson eyes locked onto Lucky. "Mine," he rumbled. Then he charged. The drake's wings beat once, his body turning into a descending comet, heat trailing behind him as he aimed straight for Lucky. Lucky snarled and surged to meet him, but before the clash could happen, something moved. A shadow rose from the battlefield below and placed itself directly in the drake's path. An ant, 8 meters tall. Its body was pitch black, segmented like armor, with limbs thick as pillars and a head shaped like a living battering ram. The drake blood's eyes widened. "What?" The ant did not answer. It lowered its head and met him. Boom! The collision sounded like a world breaking. A shockwave burst outward, ripping through the air in a wide ring. Clouds of dust and broken stone erupted from the battlefield below as if a bomb had detonated. Several rank 3 experts were thrown off their feet. Even those who held their ground felt their bones vibrate. The drake was forced slightly backward in midair from the recoil. And the ant? The ant was pushed back too. Significantly, its legs dug into the air as if it were soil, joints groaning under pressure, its entire frame sliding backwards several meters. The force bent its posture, strained its body, and yet it held on. That was what stunned everyone watching. That was what made the Drakeblood's expression twist. "An ant?" he snarled, his voice vibrating with offended disbelief. "You dare block me with an ant?" The black ant lifted its head slowly. It was Ghost, Michael's most raw, physically powerful undead. Though Ghost said nothing and stood relatively still, anyone familiar with energy could feel the rage radiating from afar. And it was not only Ghost, for figures with similar aura and appearance to Ghost emerged from the ground. All the undead on the battlefield heard a familiar voice. "Fight to the death. We go all out, children. For survival." Soon 3 groups formed. One side, along with some race warriors, attacked the rank 4 Drakeblood. Another side attacked the bronze-skinned Amazari. The final group protected Michael, with the elven representative taking charge as she engaged the gray-robed figure among the 3. Attackers. The bronze-skinned Amazari's rage boiled over. "You dare!" he shouted. The air around him warped violently as his aura surged again. Far denser than before. The pressure slammed downward like a descending sky, cracking the ground beneath the charging forces. Several warriors faltered mid-step, their legs buckling, blood spilling from mouths and noses. But they did not stop. The silver-haired elder raised her hand, her water law igniting as it carved a path through the pressure. Chapter 742 Smell of Death 5. The bronze-skinned Amazari's face twisted. "I should have erased you all back then." The air screamed as his air law responded to his fury. Invisible, currents compressed and folded inward, forming layer upon layer of cutting force around his body. "Charging me with ants and corpses," he continued, his voice rising. "Do you truly believe numbers matter?" He lifted his arm slowly, fingers curling. "I am rank 4. The pressure spiked. Several rank 3 beings at the front were forced to their knees instantly, bones creaking under the weight of his presence. Even those behind them felt their lungs tighten and their hearts stutter. Yet the silver-haired elder did not stop. She stepped through the pressure. Her aura flared, silver and sharp, pushing back against his law just enough to keep moving. This time, however, she was not the one leading the charge, nor were Michael's lesser undead. Two massive figures surged forward instead, a male and a female undead that clearly came from the same race, charging straight toward the rank 4 Amazari. It was Beginning and Lily. By the time they closed the distance, meeting him in midair, both had grown to nearly 20 meters tall. The bronze-skinned Amazari's patience snapped completely. The air around him detonated outward as his law surged. Invisible, blades screamed through the battlefield, descending in wide arcs meant to erase everything in their path. Several rank 3 beings were cut down instantly. Bodies were torn apart before they could even react. Stone shattered. Armor peeled away like paper. The very ground was carved into deep scars, as if a god had dragged claws across it. Then his power struck the two figures charging straight at him. Beginning took it head-on. The massive undead did not dodge. He did not slow. The compressed air slammed into his body and tore into him with horrifying force. Flesh ruptured. Bone cracked. His torso caved inward in places as layers of cutting pressure stacked again and again, each strike landing atop the last. The damage piled up relentlessly. Chunks of his body were shredded away, blasted off in violent bursts, yet he kept moving. His regeneration ignited. Muscle reknit. Bone reformed. Dark flesh crawled back into place even as it was being destroyed. The more damage he took, the more violently his body responded, repairing itself in grotesque, unstoppable waves. Beside him, Lily met the attack differently. The moment the cutting currents reached her, her body twisted unnaturally, opening seams along her frame as if welcoming the destruction. The air law tore into her, shredding her surface and ripping chunks of her form apart. And Lily devoured it. Apparently, opening her mouth to devour was only the most primitive way she used her law, not the only way it could be utilized. Fragments of compressed force vanished into her body, absorbed and broken down even as the remainder continued to tear her apart. Her form destabilized, cracked, and warped under the strain. Entire sections of her body collapsed, dissolved, and reformed in the same instant. She was being destroyed, and healing, over and over. Her regeneration was slower than Beginning's, but just as unsettling. The bronze-skinned Amazari's eyes widened in disbelief. These things. And in that moment, the battlefield did not give him time to adjust. The other undead and supernatural struck. Blades of mana, elemental attacks, cursed projectiles, and coordinated strikes slammed into him from every direction. Rank 3 beings who would have been erased individually now attacked. As a single, relentless mass, the silver-haired elder's water law surged forward, binding and crushing at the same time, forcing him to divert his focus. The pressure around him wavered, just slightly, but that was enough. Beginning roared and closed the remaining distance, his ruined chest. Knitting together mid-charge. Lily followed, her distorted form lashing outward as fragments of devoured attacks erupted from her body like warped counterattacks. The bronze-skinned Amazari was forced to split his attention. A portion of his energy shifted outward, reinforcing his defenses against the incoming swarm. And for the first time since his arrival, he was no longer overwhelming everything with ease. The battlefield turned into a grinder. The bronze-skinned Amazari hovered in place like an executioner, his presence crushing and absolute, and yet the swarm did not break. Air blades kept falling. Rank 3 bodies burst apart without warning. A Karveth warrior raised his shield and the shield split cleanly. Then the man behind it followed. A Varelian flyer tried to spiral upward, and a single ripple of air snapped her wing, spinning her into the earth like a broken spear. Undead died the same way. Some were bisected and kept crawling forward with halves of their bodies dragging behind them. Others were shredded into fragments so small they could not regenerate fast enough. The air filled with blood mist, bone dust, and scattered chunks of armor that had once been living flesh. Michael felt every severed link. Not all of it. His mind could not afford that. But the moment an undead truly vanished, the bond snapped with a violent tug, and his vision stuttered as blood poured from his mouth despite the elves nearby doing their best to stabilize him. He forced himself to stay upright through sheer will, hands trembling as he kept sending commands through the chaos. Fight, hold, protect. He could not allow the formation to collapse. Beginning and Lily continued to push through. The bronze-skinned Amazari's eyes narrowed further when he realized they were not slowing. He poured more power into the cutting currents, compressing them until the air itself screamed. Beginning took the punishment like a wall. His body was being erased piece by piece. Each time a blade passed through him, it carved grooves deep enough to expose bone. His shoulder exploded, then reformed. His ribs shattered, then grew back crooked for a heartbeat before snapping into alignment as regeneration corrected itself. He kept moving as Lily absorbed what she could. /N. Please vote to support the story. Chapter 743 Smell of Death 6. While the battlefield above devolved into carnage, another clash unfolded at the edge of the chaos. The gray-robed man drifted backward through the air, hands clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed to the point of mockery. The violence around him did not seem to concern him in the slightest. His dark eyes followed the movements of the battlefield with idle curiosity, as if he were watching a distant storm. However, this was only what he showed on the surface. Internally, he was in shock. It was not even the ferocity of the 3 races that surprised him, but the capability of the young Necromancer and his undead. Now that he was seeing it face to face, he could somewhat understand Brian's feelings. This was someone he himself would not dare to confront if they were at full power, so what hope would anyone weaker than him have? To avoid any further surprises, the gray-robed figure wanted to get rid of Michael as soon as possible. If before his desire to do so had stemmed from annoyance at the youth ruining his plan, now it was out of necessity. It was easy to judge a Necromancer's strength, and Michael was clearly one of the abnormal ones. Even rank 3 Necromancers did not possess this level of power. He was obviously different, or he had a secret. Either way, this person was a threat. Opposite the gray-robed figure stood the elven representative. Her feet hovered in midair, long hair flowing behind her as mana gathered around her slender form. Her expression remained calm, but the air around her was anything but. Below them, several undead and members of the 3 races surrounded Michael as they either protected him or tried to stabilize his condition. The gray-robed man watched the carnage below for a few more seconds before exhaling softly. "This is becoming troublesome," he said calmly. "We should do this the easy way." His gaze shifted past the elven representative and locked onto Michael below, bloodied, shaking, yet still kneeling upright at the center of the storm. "Hand the boy over," he continued. "End this farce, and the rest of you may yet live." The elf did not answer immediately. Her eyes followed his gaze to Michael, to the undead throwing themselves into certain destruction, to the races bleeding and dying simply to buy him time. It was not that elves were indifferent to those outside their race, but the current situation was different. It involved them as well. The elven representative looked back at the gray-robed man. "Is that a threat?" she asked calmly. The gray-robed man smiled. The elf's expression did not change. Mana gathered around her. Wood grew where nothing had been, pale at first, then darkening as if decades passed in a heartbeat. The gray-robed man's smile lingered. "Call it whatever you like," he said. "A warning, perhaps. I am giving you a chance to be sensible." The elven representative responded after a brief silence. Her hands lifted, fingers spreading as if she were grasping the air itself. The mana around her thickened, then turned verdant, and the space between her palms rippled like water. The gray-robed man's smile did not vanish, but it tightened. The elf's voice was quiet. "Bloom," the world answered. A crown of branches exploded into existence above her head. Leaves formed, then sharpened, each one thin as paper and bright with a green edge that looked almost metallic. They spun in a widening halo, then shot forward in a storm. 1,000 leaf blades. The gray-robed man's robe fluttered. He lifted a hand and drew a line through the air, slow and effortless. The line became a boundary. Everything that crossed it aged. The leaf blades hit the invisible boundary and turned gray in an instant. Their green edges dulled. Their structure collapsed. They crumbled into dust that drifted downward like dead pollen. The elf's eyes narrowed. She shifted her hands again. The dust did not fall. It stopped. Then it reversed. The dead particles vibrated, and a low hum filled the air as she forced life back into what his law had emptied. The dust thickened into seeds. The seeds split into sprouts. The sprouts became whips of vine that lashed forward in synchronized strikes. The gray-robed man's expression finally changed. He stepped sideways, his body blurring slightly, and the vines that should have hit him struck only pale air. A second later, his voice sounded behind her. "Elegant," he murmured. The elf did not turn her head. A root burst from the air beside her cheek like a guard dog snapping. At a throat, the gray-robed man leaned back an inch, and the root missed him by a breath, slicing a strand of his hair. Chapter 744 Painful Comprehension. Michael Normal finally comprehends a law 1. The elf moved again. She swept her palm downward, and the space beneath the gray-robed man thickened, then erupted into a spiraling lattice of roots that grew from empty air. They wrapped toward him in silent coils. The gray-robed man's eyes narrowed. "Die," he whispered. Withering flowed. The roots turned brittle before they could close. Their green sheen dulled into gray, then into powder. The air filled with dead dust again, falling in slow spirals. But the elf did not stop. Her fingers flicked, and the dust became spores. Each particle flared with faint light, then multiplied, exploding outward into a swarm of microscopic seeds that flooded the air around him like a cloud of living knives. The gray-robed man's robe snapped. His aura expanded. The cloud crossed into his domain and collapsed instantly, as if all the vitality inside it had been ripped away at the root. The seeds died mid-flight and fell as ash. The gray-robed man smiled, cold and patient. "You cannot outlast me," he said. "Everything living ends." The elf's gaze sharpened. "Nature is omnipotent. Anything that goes against it pays the price." She clapped her hands once. A wave of verdant mana rolled outward, and the space around the gray-robed man suddenly thickened with scent, with moisture, with the heavy weight of an unseen forest. For a breath, his withering law slowed. Just a fraction. The elf used that fraction. She extended 2 fingers, and a line of green light shot forward like a whip, splitting into dozens of strands mid-flight. The gray-robed man's expression tightened. His right hand rose. Law skill. Empty season. The pale domain surged outward, washing over the green pressure like a flood. Where it touched, the world faded. The moisture vanished. The scent disappeared. The elf's face tightened for a heartbeat as her law constructs flickered. The strands snapped and died one after another. The gray-robed man stepped forward, slow and confident. "I won't repeat this again," he said calmly. "Hand him over." The elf did not answer. She shifted her hands again, but this time the green did not bloom outward. It folded inward, compressed, condensed. A sphere of living rules formed in front of her palm, vibrating with suppressed force. She thrust it forward. The sphere exploded into a ring of green blades that curved around the gray-robed man from both sides at once, seeking his blind spots. He tilted his head slightly. Law skill. Decay spiral. A thin gray ring appeared around his wrist and expanded in a silent sweep. The green blades touched the gray ring and crumbled. Their life ripped out in an instant. But the elf had already followed. She blurred forward, closing the distance, her palm striking through the gap where the blades had died, aiming for his chest. The gray-robed man turned, his robe fluttering. He dodged by a breath. Her palm grazed his shoulder. Green light burst. His robe tore. A thin line of gray bled across the fabric as the withering law fought. Her influence. They separated again, hovering a short distance apart. Below them, Michael's vision pulsed. He could feel the battle above only as distant tremors. His undead were still dying. The bond snapped again, and each snap felt like a hook tearing through his mind. He clenched his jaw. His hands trembled. But his mind was not yet dull. Command pushed through the chaos. "Fade. Leave my side. Kill him." A shadow detached from the formation around Michael. At first, it was only a ripple in the air. Then the ripple expanded. A huge black mantis appeared, its body like polished obsidian, limbs bladed and long, its head angled downward with predatory stillness. Its presence was almost invisible. It appeared directly beside the gray-robed man with no warning or sound. Fade's scythe-like arm swung, aimed for the man's neck. The elf's eyes widened slightly. Even she had not sensed it until it existed. The gray-robed man reacted instantly. His body slid sideways in a blur, the strike carving through empty air. Where his body had been a moment earlier. A thin line of gray dust trailed behind him as he moved. He turned his head, eyes sharpening for the first time into something truly dangerous. "You dare sneak up on me?" he roared. Fade did not pause. The mantis flickered again, reappearing above him, then behind him, then to his left, each movement a clean jump through space, each strike aimed at a killing point. The gray-robed man avoided the first, then the second, then the third. He dodged, slipping through narrow gaps with an elegance that did not fit the brutality of his law. But the elf moved with Fade now. The moment the gray-robed man dodged, green light surged to fill the space he left behind. Roots formed like traps. Leaf blades curved in pursuit. Every dodge became a step into another attack. For the first time since the clash began, the gray-robed man was forced to stop drifting backward lazily. His robe snapped as his aura surged. His pale domain expanded again. "Enough," he said quietly. The air turned thin. The mantis pushed through anyway. Its blade descended. The gray-robed man raised 2 fingers. The space between his fingers turned gray. Fade's blade grazed that gray line, and a portion of its scythe arm instantly withered, cracking and shedding into ash mid-swing. Fade recoiled, its body flickering backward. The gray-robed man looked down at the falling ash, then back at the mantis. His smile returned, smaller and colder. Meanwhile, as everyone battled for their own reasons, Michael could no longer bear the pain of his soul being torn apart. Tears mixed with the blood flowing from his eyes. One had to understand that Michael shared 2 types of connection with his undead. The first was the necromantic bond between a necromancer and his undead, a link of master and servant. The second, far stronger due to reinforcement by his talent, was the bond of bloodkin. His undead shared his blood. Losing them caused pain as well, but it was not pain that struck only the soul. The body suffered alongside it. Yet within this mysterious state, Michael was learning something new. The saying that you do not know what you have until you lose it was unfolding before him, though in a very different way. Chapter 745 Painful Comprehension 2. Each time an undead fell, something vanished for a fraction of a heartbeat before the backlash arrived. In that gap, Michael felt it clearly. It was not death. It was absence, as if a limb had been removed rather than destroyed. That was when he realized it. The destroyed bond seemed to return something that had always belonged to him, though in a less complete state that would either naturally recover or, depending on the damage, remain incomplete. Blood dripped from Michael's chin, but his shaking slowed. When another undead was torn apart above, the pain struck again, but this time Michael felt something else. A perspective. A way of being. His vision blurred. Michael's pupils constricted. He understood then why it hurt so much. Because they were not dying for him. They were dying from him. Michael's chest rose with a ragged breath. The battlefield noise faded until it sounded like it was behind thick glass. The only thing he could hear clearly was the snapping of bonds, one after another, like threads being cut inside his skull. Then he saw it. Not with his eyes. With the part of him that had been stretched across those contracts. Lucky was not just lucky. Fade was not just fade. Ghost was not just ghost. They were containers, bases, bodies built to hold another him. Yes, they had different edges and different instincts, but they were still him. A network of selves. A distributed existence wearing many masks. Now it made sense. To raise an undead, one did not necessarily need to sacrifice a part of the soul, but while it was not the only way, it was the most complete one. Now Michael was starting to understand something. Michael's lips parted. No words came out. A cold understanding slid into place. For the first time, Michael did not feel the contracts as chains. He felt them as veins. And through those veins, he felt the undead as chambers of his own existence. The pain returned. A fresh bond snapped. Michael flinched. But inside that pain, he caught the echo again. A part of him had returned, even as the base it occupied had disappeared. Michael's eyes widened slightly. Michael finally understood the deeper nature of his bond. His undead were not separate lives he puppeteered. They were his existence split into different pieces. And if they could contain pieces of him, then he could contain pieces of them. The thought landed like a silent bell. Michael's blood-stained fingers curled against the earth. And deep inside him, something grew. If anyone had been paying attention to Michael now, they would have noticed the change happening to him. Michael was stepping through the first gate any supernatural had to pass to draw closer to the universe. In doing so, he had uncovered another secret of existence and found his own truth. Michael awakened a law seed, a whisper of the universe recognizing the truth he had just touched. That which is mine can reflect me, and I can reflect it in return. What Michael touched was not death, nor creation, nor authority. It was continuity. He understood that the universe did not exist as a single, distant whole. It existed as layers within layers, each complete on its own and each a fragment of something greater. A forest was not separate from the land. A cell was not separate from the body. A star was not separate from the void it burned within. The universe was the universe, and everything inside it was also the universe. Life did not flow from a single source outward. It circulated. It divided, nested, returned, and divided again, endlessly preserving itself through form rather than isolation. What mattered was not shape, but connection. Perhaps this was how races first came into being. Humanity may have begun from a single individual or maybe two, and even if their numbers later grew to millions, in the bluntest sense they were still extensions of that original figure or figures. Michael finally saw where he stood in that truth. He was not a singular existence commanding lesser ones. He was a core, and his undead were not followers orbiting him, but a means for existence to continue outward from him. When one fell, it was not loss. It was collapse, and collapse always returned something to the center. Michael's breath steadied. In that moment, his body felt small, kneeling in blood and ruin. But his awareness did not. He was not surrounded by undead. He was inhabited by them. Or perhaps they were inhabited by him. the distinction no longer mattered, because Michael finally understood the part of the universe that answered him, not the part that ruled life, but the part that allowed life to exist everywhere at once. And in that understanding, a quiet, absolute truth settled into his soul. Michael was no longer just a being within the universe. He was a universe. The universe answered with recognition. The law seed inside Michael stabilized, its name forming as a fact the universe already accepted. Law of echoed existence. Existence was not singular. Existence was reflected. Michael did not announce it. He did not need to. The law turned inward, then outward along the veins that connected him to his undead. And instinctively, without thought or intent, Michael borrowed something from one of them. Beginning. The law of brutal rebirth. Its name and concept surfaced clearly in Michael's mind. Born from agony and forged in survival, this law transformed pain into fuel. Severe wounds triggered violent regenerative surges. The closer to death, the stronger the rebirth. This was Beginning's realized truth. As Michael's law resonated, Beginning's truth echoed back. A low thrum spread through Michael's shattered body. His torn flesh burned. His cracked bones screamed. Then his blood reversed its flow. Muscle fibers knotted and reforged themselves thicker. Cracks sealed violently, as if his body rejected the idea of remaining. Broken, felt like rebirth. And with it came strength. The closer Michael had been to collapse, the more violently his body responded. Every wound became fuel. Every tear in his flesh became pressure forcing him forward. His spine straightened. His trembling stopped. Mana roared through his veins. Michael gasped as air filled his lungs like it was the first breath he had ever taken, and he felt it clearly now. This was Beginning's law. Brutal rebirth. And Michael was using it. Chapter 746, Painful Comprehension. 3. Edited. However, Michael noticed the difference almost immediately. It did not feel like he was truly wielding Beginning's truth. It felt like he was forcing it through a narrower channel, like a copy instead of the original script. The pattern was there, but the authority behind it was thinner. Beginning's brutal rebirth, at its peak, could erupt into a temporary rise so violent it was almost absurd. At the edge of destruction, Beginning could increase his level by 15, if only for a brief window. Michael doubted he could reach even half of that. But even half was still terrifying. Michael had been carrying injury after injury for too long. His body was stacked with damage, layered with fractures, torn tissue, internal strain, and soul backlash, all of it compounded. When the rebirth mechanism ignited, it pushed him upward in state. For a moment, Michael felt himself enter a threshold he had only sensed from true rank 3 creatures. His panel did not change, and his foundation remained rank 2. Yet he stood at the absolute peak of it, so close to the ceiling that he was technically already inside. What Michael did not know was that he was at the very stage someone he knew once stood at. Teacher Brian. No, in fact, the current Michael was at a greater stage. Even before awakening, he could already contend with true rank 3 creatures without much disadvantage, aside from the most powerful among them. Then Michael noticed something else. Beginning's law was not the only thing he could copy. The law of echoed existence was wider than he had expected. It was not limited to law truths alone. It was a reflection. Anything that made up his existence could be echoed. Even race traits, attribute structures, instinctive advantages. Michael could copy it all. The drawback was simple. He could feel the borrowing like a flame held in his palm. It would not last forever. The echo would fade. The borrowed existence would return to its base. Michael had no idea how long he could maintain this state. Seconds? Minutes? He did not know. But he could feel the clock ticking within him. The change that had happened to him was only noticed by the elves around him who had been casting healing spells. They looked at him like he was some kind of monster, but Michael did not have time to acknowledge their gazes. Michael turned his attention back to the battlefield. The chaos had split into 3 distinct fronts. One sky burned with heat and poison as the rank 4 Drakeblood tore through the air, trading monstrous blows with Lucky, Ghost, and the other undead that threw themselves into its path without hesitation. Another space screamed with compressed wind and collapsing pressure where the bronze-skinned Amazari hovered like a living calamity. Fighting beginning, Lily, and the combined forces of the three races in a grinding clash that turned bodies into mist and stone into dust. The third front, though involving only two individuals, was no less intense. There, the elven representative and the gray-robed figure faced one another alone. Michael's vision lingered on that clash. The elf moved again and swept her palm downward. The space beneath the gray-robed man thickened, then erupted into a spiraling lattice of roots that grew from empty air. They wrapped toward him in silent coils. The gray-robed man's eyes narrowed. "Die!" he whispered. Withering flowed. The roots turned brittle before they could close. Their green sheen dulled into gray, then into powder. The air filled with dead dust again, falling in slow spirals. But the elf did not stop. Her fingers flicked, and the dust became spores. Each particle flared with faint light, then multiplied, exploding outward into a swarm of microscopic seeds that flooded the air around him like a cloud of living knives. The gray-robed man's robe snapped as his aura expanded. The cloud crossed into his domain and collapsed instantly, as if all vitality inside it had been ripped away at the root. The seeds died mid-flight and fell as ash. This exchange repeated itself several times, with Fade intervening through sneak attacks whenever openings appeared. Anyone watching from afar could tell that unless one side made a mistake or something external interfered, the battle would not end anytime soon. The three involved understood this as well, yet each still fought with everything they had to defeat the others. What they had not expected was, for the very reason they were fighting, to enter the fray as well. A thunderous crack echoed. It was a sonic boom. The elf and the gray-robed man reacted at the same time. Their heads snapped toward the source. Space distorted. Then a figure appeared. The air in front of the gray-robed man folded inward, and a bloodied figure stood there, feet planted in empty space as if it were solid ground. Michael. His clothes were torn and soaked dark with blood. Dried streaks ran down his face from his eyes and chin. His body still bore the signs of ruin, yet he stood upright. The pressure around him was dense, like standing too close to something vast. The gray-robed man's pupils constricted. The elf's breath caught. "You!" the gray-robed man exclaimed in shock. Michael answered with a punch. There was no warning. The gray-robed man barely had time to set a defense with his law. Withering met brutal rebirth. Michael felt it immediately. The resistance was immense. The gray field gnawed at his flesh, draining vitality, eroding strength, trying to age his arm into nothingness. His skin blackened, cracked, and began to crumble at the point of contact. Then brutal rebirth responded. Pain became fuel. /N. Sorry for the mishap. I am in an area with terrible network, and to upload the updated Chapter 1 had to walk around aimlessly. In the previous chapter, I asked for patience, and some of you gave it, knowing I never leave a chapter unedited. Thank you for your continued support. Also, I have nothing against opinions, but reading so many negative comments, which are mostly accusations, does its number on me. I'm just a human doing his best at writing. Chapter 747, Power of a Legion 1. Pain became fuel. Any normal body would have collapsed the instant the withering law touched it. Even rank 3 beings of equal strength would avoid direct contact with that gray domain. Michael did not. The blackened cracks on his forearms spread for a heartbeat. Then they reversed. Blood surged backward through his veins. The crumbling flesh thickened instead of thinning. New muscle formed beneath ruined tissue, denser and tighter, as if his body was learning how to survive the attack in real time. The gray-robed man's eyes widened. Michael stepped forward. The withering law gnawed at him again, trying to hollow him out from the inside, and brutal rebirth answered. The closer his arm came to destruction, the more violently his body pushed back. Pain did not weaken him but sharpened him, and every moment of loss became force. Michael threw another punch. The gray-robed man retreated instantly. He did not allow Michael to close the distance again. A wave of gray surged outward, forcing space itself to thin and fade between them. Michael was pushed back mid-stride, his feet skidding through empty air. The gray-robed man's expression hardened. This was no longer disdain. This was caution. Michael lunged again. His body cracked the air with another sonic burst as he forced his way through the gray pressure. His skin aged and regenerated in the same breath, then stabilized stronger than before. He reached the edge of the gray domain. The gray-robed man unleashed a sweeping decay wave meant to erase everything in its path. Michael punched through it. The force detonated outward, ripping the air apart. Gray energy, scattered like torn. Michael burst through, blood spraying from fresh wounds that closed almost instantly. The gray-robed man was forced back again. For the first time, he lost ground. Michael followed relentlessly. Every step brought more damage. Every exchange carved new wounds into his body. And every wound made him stronger. Undying. Unyielding. A monster built from loss and return. The gray-robed man stopped trying to overpower him. Instead, he kept distance. Decay fields layered upon one another, forming barriers, dead zones, hollow spaces where life could not exist. Michael forced his way through them one after another, each breach leaving him more damaged. Then a shadow flickered. Fade reappeared above the gray-robed man. The mantis struck without hesitation, its scythe aimed for the back of the man's neck. The gray-robed man twisted sharply, gray flooding upward to intercept the strike. Fade's blade withered at the edge again, shedding ash, but the interruption was enough. Green light surged in from the side. The elf returned to the fight. Roots erupted beneath the gray-robed man's feet to limit his movement. Michael crashed forward through the opening they created, his fist slamming toward the gray-robed man's chest. The gray-robed man raised his arms, law flaring violently as he barely blocked the blow. The impact detonated. Space rippled outward. The gray-robed man was thrown back, his robe tearing further, gray energy spilling unevenly from his body. Michael landed lightly in the air, blood dripping from his knuckles, but his open wounds were already sealing. The elf hovered to his left. Fade flickered to his right. For the first time since the battle began, the gray-robed man was surrounded, and this time he did not smile. Michael's fist hung in the air for a heartbeat, knuckles dripping, and he exhaled slowly. Brutal rebirth still raged through his body like a furnace, keeping him upright through damage that should have ended him. But he could feel it. The clock, the echo was thinning. Michael's awareness sank into the veins that connected him to his legion. He reached for beginning again, but not the law this time. Something else. The race trait that made beginning what he was. Beginning was a titan, a creature built to turn mass into inevitability. At his peak, he could swell beyond 20 meters and still move like an avalanche with a mind. Michael could not take all of that. Still, even half of a titan was not human. Michael's blood-stained fingers flexed. Echo, he muttered, voice rough. The law of echoed existence responded. Michael grew. His height pushed past 3 meters. Then 4. His limbs thickened until they looked sculpted rather than grown, wrapped in dense muscle that carried unnatural weight. Every movement made the air complain. His heartbeat sounded like distant drums inside his own skull. The elf's eyes widened. Even Fade paused mid-flicker, its mantis head tilting. The gray-robed man's eyes widened in horror. Michael's body did not stop at 4 meters. His spine cracked, then reforged. His ribs widened with a grinding sound that made the air tremble. Muscle stacked on muscle violently, as if his body were being hammered into a new shape by an invisible smith. The cloth that remained on him died first. It tore. Then it burned away under the pressure of his expanding heat, and mana shredded into drifting scraps that withered into ash the moment they touched the nearby gray domain. Michael stood naked in the sky, 7 meters tall, a titan-shaped shadow hanging over the battlefield like a coming calamity. Blood ran down his chest in dark rivers, Yet even that looked wrong, because the wounds were already closing. The torn flesh stitched itself in thick cords. The bruising under his skin faded before it could fully form. Michael looked at the gray-robed man and smiled. It was not a wide grin, but it was deeply unsettling when a bloodied, handsome giant fixed his gaze on you. The gray-robed man's throat moved as he stepped back in midair, thoughts flashing through all of Brian's old and future generations. He could not understand what had happened. This youth was not at the stage where he had even begun cultivating a law, and even if he were, what was this monstrosity? What level of power had this youth gained now that if Michael touched him even once, the impact would be a disaster? The gray-robed man raised both hands. His pale domain swelled outward, thicker than before. "Stay away from me," he said, voice tight. Chapter 748, Power of a Legion 2. Michael took one step. It was slow, very slow, but the step crushed the air beneath his foot. A visible shockwave rolled out, distorting the sky in a widening ring. Michael lifted his arm. His fist was the size of a boulder now. The gray-robed man's withering law surged to meet it, eager and starving, trying to drain him down to bone and dust. But like before, though the pain hurt, it only strengthened Michael. Michael swung. The punch was not fast, but the gray-robed man did not dare to block. He could not risk it. He twisted sideways and threw distance between them in the same motion, his domain rippling as he used it like a wall to push Michael's strike off course. The fist missed by meters, and still, the shockwave tore through the air and shattered a band of dead space behind him, leaving a ragged hole where his withering had been thickest. The gray-robed man's eyes widened. He retreated again. He kept moving, refusing to let the giant close. And it would have worked if Michael were alone. A flicker of black appeared above the gray-robed man's head. Fade. The mantis struck like a guillotine, its scythe aimed for the neck. The gray-robed man's withering snapped up instinctively. The edge of Fade's blade withered again, ash spilling mid-swing. But Fade did not stop. It flickered, reappeared, struck again. The interruptions were small, and that was all the elf needed. Green surged into the gaps the moment the gray-robed man moved. Roots bloomed where he wanted to retreat. Leaf blades curved where he wanted to slip. Living pressure tightened around him, not to crush him outright, but to steal his angles and reduce the space he could use. The gray-robed man's jaw clenched. Michael took another step. It was slow and heavy. His smile did not fade. The gray-robed man threw out another decay field, wider than before, a hollow wedge meant to erase anything that entered it. Michael walked into it. Michael raised his fist inside the dead zone. The gray-robed man's expression shifted fully into alarm, because if that fist landed, his law would not save him. Not at that distance. Not against that mass. Law skill, the gray-robed man snapped, his voice sharper than it had ever been. Severing autumn. The elf's hands moved at the same time. Bloom. Fade struck again. The gray-robed man's defense rose again. And for a single instant his attention split. Michael stepped through that instant. He was slow, but the distance was no longer large. The Titan's shadow swallowed the gray-robed man's figure. Michael's fist came down. The gray-robed man's eyes widened, and the pale domain surged violently, trying to push the blow away at the last possible moment. It was too late. The fist slammed into the air in front of him, and the world detonated. A thunderclap rolled across the battlefield, louder than any before. Space rippled outward in rings. The gray-robed man was thrown back like a doll. His robe shredding, gray energy spilling from him in uneven bursts. Michael remained where he was, chest rising, his naked body steaming with heat and blood. The echo inside him screamed. The Titan form was eating time. But Michael's smile widened anyway, because the gray-robed man at this point in time only had half his body. His upper body had disappeared. For a heartbeat, everyone below forgot how to move. Whether it was the elves, the four-armed race, or the winged race, they all stared in shock. How rare was it to see someone who had not stepped into the void kill someone drenched in it? It was rare to the point of being almost impossible. They all stared in shock at the giant hanging in the air. 7 meters tall, blood-streaked, and smiling. The elven representative hovered stiffly, her pupils tight. She had been trading laws with the gray-robed man for too long, reading the depth of his authority with every exchange. She knew what his withering could do. She knew how strong his makeshift domain was, and yet she was watching him come apart. And this was not where their shock ended, as 2 loud roars echoed. In the distance, they came from the rank 4 Amazari and the rank 4 Drakeblood who were still fighting. Shockingly, for the 3 races, it turned out those gods were at the ends of their ropes too. The rank 4 Drakeblood roared as it tore through the air, its massive wings beating hard enough to fracture clouds and scatter storms. Its scales glowed with layered hues of crimson and black, veins of molten heat crawling beneath them. And yet, it was being held back by Michael's undead. Ghost was at the center. The ant's body looked small compared to the Drakeblood's vast frame, yet every segment of its obsidian shell was packed with terrifying density. For other ants flanked it, lesser than Ghost but still monstrous. They moved in perfect coordination, and above them Lucky screamed. The winged wolf tore across the sky in a blur of black and green, wings cutting arcs through the air. Poison fire spilled from his jaws in thick streams, green-black flames that hissed and screamed as they struck the Drakeblood scales. The Drakeblood howled as the poison fire seeped between its scales. Not enough to kill it, not even close, but enough to hurt. Filth! The Drakeblood roared, slashing backward with a claw the size of a tower. Lucky twisted midair, wings folding as he dropped under the strike by. A breath. The claw missed him and instead crashed into one of the ants, killing it in a single blow. On the rank 4 Amazari front, the situation was somewhat the same but also strange. And this was because of Beginning. Thanks to Michael's nurture, Beginning was at level 65. Though it made it harder for him to reach the 3rd stage of his brutal rebirth enhancement, when it did trigger, the result was clear. For a short duration, Michael possessed a half-step rank 4 powerhouse. Chapter 749 Law Domain. At some point, Beginning now stood at 40 meters tall. Opposite him hovered the bronze-skinned rank 4 Amazari. Rings of compressed air rotated around him in slow, controlled orbits, each one dense enough to carve stone apart with a thought. His eyes were calm, calculating, but the tension in his posture betrayed him. Beginning roared, but the Amazari moved first. His hand snapped forward, and the air screamed. A compressed lance of wind slammed into Beginning's chest, drilling straight through muscle and bone in an instant. The impact exploded out the Titan's back in a plume of blood and shattered flesh, leaving a hollow crater where his heart should have been. For a fraction of a second, the battlefield went silent. Then Beginning took another step. The wound closed as he moved. Muscle surged inward. Bone and flesh knit together with a wet, grinding sound. The Amazari's eyes narrowed. He saw Beginning swing at him. There was no technique, no finesse, just mass and momentum. The air screamed as his fist descended, dragging pressure behind it like a collapsing sky. The Amazari vanished in a flash, reappearing 100 meters away as the blow shattered the ground, flattening everything beneath it into a crater miles wide. The shockwave tore through nearby formations, sending debris and bodies flying. The Amazari raised both arms. The air around him folded inward. "Sky rend," he said calmly. The space between him and Beginning collapsed into a storm of invisible blades. Hundreds of cuts struck at once. Beginning's body was shredded. And then he healed. Again. And again. The Amazari struck again, layering his attacks now, combining crushing pressure with slicing force, trying to overwhelm the regeneration through sheer output. It did not work. Beginning reached him. The Titan's hand closed around the Amazari's torso. The air detonated. The Amazari escaped at the last moment, leaving behind a burst of compressed wind that exploded against Beginning's palm and tore half his hand apart. It regenerated mid-motion. Beginning grabbed again. The Amazari countered with a full-body release. A dome of compressed air erupted outward, slamming into Beginning's chest and blasting him backward for the first time. The Titan crashed through a mountain. Stone collapsed around him. Dust and debris filled the sky. The Amazari hovered, breathing heavier now. If others could see him clearly, they would see the horror he has in his expression. From being matched by several undead to just one could hardly understand the stage of the rank 4 Amazari who for the first time in many years also felt the scent of death again. The mountain moved again. Beginning rose from the rubble, his body already restored. He roared again, and charged, but this time with a different method that made the rank 4 Amazari shout in despair. "Don't force me," he said. What mainly differentiated rank 4 and rank 3 was the law domain, which grew from the previous law seed as a rank 3. Though some talented or experienced rank 3 could create a makeshift domain which sometimes ended up as a prototype for their law domain when they ascended or was the prototype, it couldn't be compared to an actual law domain rank 4 creatures had. However, in the early floors of Hell, this particular advantage rank 4 creatures could not be used, as even a second of using it meant a drain on their lifespan and foundation. Except they were backed against the last possible wall, most rank 4 who had business in the early floors of Hell would rather lose a limb. This situation also caused another reason why they had fear towards some certain powers. One of those powers being half-step rank 4 creatures. Half-step meant they hadn't truly entered the rank, but they were infinitely close to it, and what did this mean? It meant that they could use some abilities exclusive to rank 4 creatures like the most trait, the law domain, though it was an incomplete one. This was what made the rank 4 Amazari feel despair. Because as Beginning closed on him, he was already activating his law domain. On instinct, the Amazari wanted to do the same. Law domain cancelled law domain with the superior one being able to take over, but the rank 4 Amazari stopped himself in time. If this was outside Hell, he wouldn't have hesitated. No. He wouldn't even have needed his law domain to handle an incomplete one that couldn't utilize its own space. But in Hell he had to be very careful. Someone with a partial law domain could resist him to a certain extent, especially in the suppressed state, and with the rules of Hell, the longer he took to handle Beginning, the worse the situation would be for him. Even if he succeeded in taking care of Beginning, in a weakened state he'd need to take care of the supernaturals around. The rank 4 Amazari felt it was better to run away. These were his thoughts as he made his decision. But unfortunately, he hadn't expected Beginning's law domain would actually give a surprise. Law of brutal rebirth. Born from agony and forged in survival. The closer to death, the stronger the rebirth. What happened when a law domain was created on this concept with its host needing to be close to death? The revelation was sinister. A complete law domain was not just influence. It was a world, a sealed alternate space within the void, a pocket reality where the owner's law was not an effect, but a rule. An incomplete domain was different, could not fully detach from the world, could not become a true alternate space. Instead, it spilled into reality like a warped layer, placed over the existing one. It did not replace the world, but it forced a portion of the world to obey different principles. And when Beginning pushed past his limit, the air around him changed first. Colors dulled into harsh contrast. The empty air beneath Beginning's feet darkened in a widening circle. A ring spread outward. 100 meters. 200. 1,000. Within it, every sound became muffled, like the battlefield was suddenly behind thick glass. And in that radius, everyone felt it. The bronze-skinned rank 4 Amazari's eyes widened. "No," he hissed, the word leaving him with real fear for the first time, as he noticed something wrong with his body. The concept of brutal rebirth was simple. The closer to death, the stronger the return. Destruction became momentum. Now imagine that concept expanded into an area. Imagine a place where damage was not loss. The Amazari tried to move. His body did not respond. Beginning tried to move as well, but his colossal body froze mid-step. His muscles locked in a state of tense stillness. For a heartbeat, it looked like both giants had been turned into statues. Then the real horror happened as both of them were pulled outward. The Amazari's eyes shot wide as his soul was dragged out of his body. One moment he was in his body and the next, he was standing in front of his own body, looking at it like it belonged to someone else. His physical form remained suspended in the air, unmoving, but his soul stood outside in his image. He could see the same thing had happened to Beginning. A soul form rose from the Titan's body like a second giant stepping out of a shell. Beginning's soul was massive. It looked less like a humanoid spirit and more like a towering silhouette of condensed will and hunger, with veins of red-gold light running through it like molten lines. The Amazari's breath caught. This was impossible. A domain forcing separation of body and soul was not a common phenomenon, not even among rank 4. It was something that required deep control, deep authority, and a concept that could reach into the structure of existence itself. But brutal rebirth was never a normal law in the first place. The rank 4 Amazari stepped fully into the law domain, and the moment he did, his connection to the universe screamed in warning. Brutal rebirth. This was not a domain that protected its owner. It was a crucible. Inside this space, existence itself was treated as material. Anything that entered the domain was reduced to a single truth. If it could endure to the end, it would grow stronger. If it could not, its existence would be stripped apart and returned as fuel. Devour, refine, return. That was the law. The most terrifying part was that the domain did not recognize ownership. Beginning was not exempt. The one who manifested the law held no absolute authority within it. If Beginning were pushed closer to death than his opponent, he too could be consumed by the same mechanism. His existence would be broken down and used to strengthen whatever survived him. No wonder it was called brutal rebirth. It simply meant becoming stronger at the risk of actual death. A death one agreed to. Chapter 750 Rebirth 1. Looking at the dark domain suspended in midair, everyone who gazed upon it felt a chill crawl down their spine. Even Michael was not exempt. Though he had only just begun to understand the universe and had barely formed a true relationship with it, his other advantages made the truth impossible to miss. If one were forced to say it plainly, the universe showed Michael a subtle bias. His connection through echoed existence, his growing comprehension of laws, and his connection to Beginning allowed fragments of understanding to flow to him naturally. Just a few moments observing Beginning's domain were enough. Things that had never quite fit together before finally clicked into place. Law of brutal rebirth. From its name alone, one would assume it meant being born again, a cycle of renewal. And until now, that was how it had appeared. A violent enhancement, a terrifying buff that pushed Beginning beyond his limits when he stood on the edge of death. But that had never felt complete. Even when Beginning triggered the third stage of his transformation, even when his body was broken and reforged again and again, it still felt like survival rather than rebirth. Michael had tried to understand why for a long time. In the end, he had given up, assuming the answer lay somewhere far beyond his reach. He had not expected to find it today. Brutal rebirth was brutal because rebirth was not guaranteed. To reach the third stage, Beginning had to suffer catastrophic damage. To activate his law domain, he had to go further still. He had to place his life entirely on the line, with no certainty of return. The domain itself was proof of that truth. Inside it, rebirth was not a gift. It was a verdict. Only by being pushed to the absolute edge of annihilation could one earn the right to exist again in a stronger form. And even the owner of the law was not spared from that judgment. It was a domain of trial, and that was why it deserved its name. Beginning's law domain did not oppose the universe. It mirrored it. Stars were the first proof. A star burned for eons, forging heavier elements in its core, until the pressure became too much and it collapsed. That collapse looked like death, but it was not. The explosion scattered the star's body across the void, seeding space with the materials needed for planets, oceans, and life. Without stellar death, there could be no worlds. Even life itself obeyed that cycle. Cells died so bodies could grow. Old flesh was broken down so new flesh could take its place. Muscles tore under strain and healed thicker. Bones fractured and reformed denser. Growth had always demanded damage first. Civilizations were no different. Empires rose, expanded, rotted from within, and collapsed. Their ruins became foundations for the next age. Knowledge survived through destruction, refined by failure, strengthened by loss. The universe did not reward preservation. It rewarded continuation. Only that which could endure collapse and still reform deserved to exist in a stronger state. That was the truth brutal rebirth touched. Even the owner of the law stood under the same judgment. Perhaps that was why it was so powerful as it was terrifying. However, all of Michael's comprehension did not concern beginning and the rank 4 Amazari who were currently fighting in their soul forms. Fighting with souls was a different fight from when they had their bodies. After all, the soul was not a physical thing. However, as it was the essence of supernaturals, since if the body died and the soul did not, they were alive but dead. If it was vice versa, the damage a soul form could cause was still very terrifying. One would think that the rank 4 Amazari would have an advantage in this battle thanks to him being a rank above, but with Beginning's enhancement from before he activated his domain plus the suppression from hell the Amazari still faced, they were quite even with the Amazari just having a slowly growing upper hand. Beginning moved again. His massive soul form swung a fist at his opponent. The Amazari reacted instantly. The rings of air that once circled his body now surrounded his soul. He thrust his hand forward. Beginning's soul torso ruptured, torn open by layered air blades that sliced through him. The Amazari froze as he felt power surge into him. The damage he inflicted did not dissipate Beginning's soul. It flowed back, feeding him. Beginning staggered. Unlike before, there was no regenerative ability here. After all, that was what the domain represented. The domain did not favor him. It did not recognize him as master. It only recognized exchange. Beginning roared and charged again, abandoning defense entirely. His soul shoulder slammed into a wall of compressed air, tearing another part of his essence apart. He ignored it and grabbed. The Amazari twisted away, but not cleanly. Beginning's massive soul hand tore through his side, ripping a chunk of bronze-tinted essence free. The Amazari screamed as the torn fragment of his soul dissolved into light and sank into Beginning's soul like molten metal poured into a cracked mold. His presence swelled violently. The shredded portions of his essence thickened as the torn part recovered as well. The Amazari recoiled, horror flashing across his face. So that was it. The deeper the damage, the greater the return. For both of them, he lashed out desperately, unleashing a storm of air laws that carved Beginning's soul into fragments again and again. Each strike fed him more strength, but each damage on his soul also pushed Beginning's strength. From the outer battlefield, one of the watching races finally moved. It was a warrior of the four-armed race. His eyes burning with urgency as he watched Beginning's soul flicker under the Amazari's relentless assault. To him, it was obvious. Beginning was losing ground. Slowly, yes, but undeniably. He did not hesitate. With a roar, he charged straight toward the darkened space of the domain. *n. Refresh next chapter to refresh delayed corrections. Chapter 751 Rebirth 2. The instant his body crossed the boundary, everything stopped. His forward momentum died as if he had slammed into invisible stone. His forearms froze mid-stride. What dash? He never finished the thought when something pulled from within him. A violent wrench tore through his existence, and his vision inverted. One moment he was inside his body. The next he was standing outside it. His physical form remained suspended at the edge of the domain, eyes wide and lifeless, while his soul was dragged fully into the crucible. His soul form flickered into existence smaller, far weaker than the two titans already fighting, its outline unstable and trembling. The four-armed warrior screamed. Inside the domain, the rules were absolute. The rank 4 Amazari turned first. His eyes lit up. Another participant. Another source. He struck without mercy. But he wasn't the only one, as Beginning also sent out a punch. A compressed air blade tore through the four-armed warrior's soul, splitting it nearly in half with a gigantic punch finishing it off. The scream cut off abruptly as the soul convulsed, and power surged. The Amazari shuddered as strength flooded into him. his soul expanding, stabilizing further. He understood instantly. This domain rewarded violence indiscriminately. Beginning felt it too. The moment the other soul was wounded, fragments of refined essence scattered through the domain. Some were drawn to the Amazari. Others flowed into Beginning. The Titan roared, his soul flaring brighter as stolen strength reinforced his crumbling form. Beginning did not waste the opening. The four-armed warrior's soul collapsed into fragments. Some surged into the Amazari, but a larger portion was swallowed by Beginning. The Amazari sensed it and reacted instantly. He snapped his hand forward. A ring of compressed air spun into a wheel and slammed into Beginning's soul shoulder, shearing off a chunk the size of a cart. The severed essence burst into shining dust. The Amazari inhaled sharply as the dust rushed into him and fed him with power. His soul presence expanded, bronze light hardening at the edges. Beginning answered with raw brutality. He stepped into the blade storm, letting it cut him again just to get closer. Each slice tore lines into his soul. Each line became a stream of fuel for the Amazari. But the Titan's fist landed. Beginning's soul hand smashed into the Amazari's chest and caved it inward. The bronze-skinned man staggered, rings of air faltering for half a breath. Beginning leaned in and bit. A section of the Amazari's soul, the size of a limb, was torn free and dragged into Beginning. The Amazari screamed, and Beginning grew stronger. The Amazari tried to retreat. Beginning followed, wounded and burning, but now faster. The Amazari unleashed a full burst. Gale burial. Air rings detonated outward, turning into a grinding sphere that shredded Beginning's soul from the waist up. The Titan's upper half became fragments. The Amazari devoured those fragments and surged again. But the moment he surged, Beginning surged too. Because in the same instant the air sphere had shredded him. Beginning's remaining lower half slammed forward and took another bite. A shoulder, an arm, a strip of spine. Each swallowed piece fed Beginning more strength, and each increase in strength made the next swallow easier. The Amazari's eyes widened in terror as he watched himself get devoured. Outside the domain, the battlefield had gone unnaturally quiet. When the four-armed warrior charged, some of the watching races felt a brief surge of hope. That hope lasted less than a second. The instant his body froze at the boundary, several rank 3 elites felt it through their instincts alone. Their spines went cold. That domain, someone whispered. Anyone that enters becomes a participant. When the four-armed warrior's soul was ripped free, gasps rippled through the assembled races as they watched the essence of the warrior flow into the Titan and the Amazari. Only when Beginning started winning did their negative feelings reduce a bit, but the fear in them did not go. Beginning's soul burned brighter. The moment the last fragment of the rank 4 Amazari's essence was torn free, his existence was stripped down to its most refined state and pulled apart by the domain without mercy. There was no one left to receive it, so it all went to Beginning. Beginning stood alone. His soul form swelled massively, no longer jagged or torn, but whole and overwhelming. Outside the domain, his physical body responded in kind. Muscles thickened, bones deepened. His 40-meter frame grew denser, heavier, and seemed to be even growing taller. There were no challengers left. The law of brutal rebirth delivered its judgment. Inside the darkened domain, the last traces of the four-armed warrior's physical body began to react. His frozen corpse, still suspended at the boundary where he had first crossed, cracked like dry clay. Veins of dull light seeped out of it, pulled by an irresistible force toward the center of the domain. The four-armed body did not resist. It had no will left. Its flesh collapsed inward, muscles unraveling into raw essence, bones dissolving into streams of pale force. In seconds, the entire body was stripped down to nothing and drawn into Beginning's physical form like smoke into a furnace. The Titan's body pulsed as the energy was absorbed. That devouring was fast because the four-armed warrior was weak. Compared to what came next, at the center of the domain, the rank 4 Amazari's physical body still stood. It hovered upright, bronze skin unbroken, eyes empty, unmoving. Though his soul had been erased completely, the body itself had not collapsed. Rank for existence was not something that vanished easily. Even without a soul, the body remained saturated with law and accumulated power that had been refined over centuries. And now, the domain turned its attention to it. The Amazari's corpse began to glow faintly. Threads of condensed essence peeled away from the bronze skin, slowly at first, then faster. Unlike the four-armed warrior, this was not a clean process. The Amazari's body still had too much. Each fragment that flowed into beginning made the Titan's body tremble violently. His muscles expanded and compressed in cycles. His bones groaned, reforging themselves again and again to handle the incoming power. Cracks appeared along his skin, sealing almost instantly as the rebirth mechanism forced his form to adapt. Beginning grew. Chapter 752, Another Death. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, high in the air, the battle with the rank 4 Drakeblood was also coming to an end. Compared to the rank 4 Amazari, who could be said to have died tragically yet with a certain dignity, the rank 4 Drakeblood went down to poison. One-on-one, Lucky could not be compared to the Drakeblood. However, with the support of his fellow undead, who were able to inflict wounds on the massive creature, Lucky's poison proved sufficient. Given enough time, it was capable of bringing down even such a terrifying giant. By the time the rank 4 Drakeblood realized the extent of the damage inside its body, it was already too late. Could only fall helplessly from the sky. In its current state, it could not even activate its law domain. Doing so would only hasten its death. Seeing the dragon-like figure plummet drew everyone's attention back to it. Shock spread across the battlefield as the races realized they had not only survived the assault of 2 rank 4 beings, but had actually managed to kill them. As these thoughts raced through their minds, the rank 4 Drakeblood struck the ground, carving out a crater several miles wide. The other races had anticipated this and had already retreated to safer distances before it landed. Just as relief was about to surface, their expressions twisted into horror when they sensed a terrifying energy beginning to bubble within the fallen Drakeblood. Is this bastard trying to self-destruct? An elf warrior with only one arm left shouted. The moment the suspicion was confirmed, the surrounding races turned and fled without hesitation. None of them had ever imagined a rank 4 supernatural who would choose self-destruction rather than die in battle. That thought was flawed. Self-destruction after a battle was still a fight to the death. The Drakeblood knew it was going to die regardless, whether it activated its domain or not, unless the others somehow gave it time to heal, suppress the poison, or retreat. Its fate had already been sealed the moment it fell from the sky. Rather than be killed by beings it considered ants, creatures that outside of hell would not even dare to look at it, it chose to drag everything around it down with it. The other races understood this too. No matter how far they ran, even if they fled through the void itself, an explosion from a rank 4 existence would still be devastating. What none of them expected was the sudden appearance of a small giant wielding a spear as long as his body, standing atop the Drakeblood's head. That mini-giant was Michael, still using Beginning's ability. The moment he saw the Drakeblood falling, Michael had already understood what was coming. Thanks to Beginning's domain, which prompted him to later activate his Eye of Truth, he became aware of the Drakeblood's condition before anyone else. He knew that even if he himself survived the blast by sheer luck, his undead would not. Michael chose action over luck. With spear in hand, he pierced through a gap between the scales protecting the drake's head, tearing flesh in the process. After successfully driving the spear deep into its skull, Michael did not stop there. He poured as much poison as possible through the spear's ability. The effect was immediate. The moment the poison reached the Drakeblood's core, the ground shook as if something vast and enraged had been violently awakened. A roar burst from the fallen Titan. It was not the proud roar of a dragon challenging the heavens. It was a scream. The rank 4 Drakeblood convulsed violently, its massive body thrashing against the shattered earth. Scales cracked and lifted as veins of sickly black-green light spread beneath them, racing outward from the wound in its skull. Its wings spasmed uselessly, claws gouging trenches miles long into the ground. Another roar followed, louder than before, filled with raw agony and disbelief. The drake blood attempted to gather power, but failed. The poison had already reached its core. Every attempt to circulate energy only accelerated its spread. His heart faltered. Its breaths came out in ragged, thunderous gasps that shook the battlefield. Michael did not retreat. Standing atop the drake's skull, his borrowed giant form trembling. Under the backlash, he ripped the spear free and drove it down again and again. Each thrust forced more poison deeper, overwhelming the drake blood's natural resistance through sheer proximity and saturation. The drake blood screamed until the sound broke. Its roar degraded into a hoarse, choking bellow as black venom leaked from its eyes, nostrils, and mouth. The terrifying pressure that had been building for self-destruction destabilized and collapsed, eroded by the poison tearing its foundation apart. The battlefield watched in stunned silence as the towering drake blood writhed in helpless agony, its end no longer a choice, but an inevitability. The struggle did not last much longer. The drake blood's massive body shuddered once more, then slowed. The violent thrashing weakened, its claws no longer carving the earth, only scraping uselessly against it. Its heart beat one final, thunderous time. Then another weaker beat. Then nothing. A rank 4 drake blood had fallen. Michael felt it before he saw it. The oppressive pressure vanished, and the suffocating sense of imminent annihilation lifted from the battlefield like a storm finally passing. Michael stood still for a moment, spear buried deep in the drake's skull, waiting. Then, slowly, he pulled the spear free and leapt down from the corpse. Behind him, the colossal body lay motionless in the crater, no longer a living calamity, but a mountain of fallen flesh. Across the battlefield, survivors stopped running. One by one, they turned back, staring in disbelief at the corpse of the rank 4 drake blood and the small giant standing beside it. Silence spread, not the fearful silence from before, but a stunned, almost reverent one. 2 rank 4 existences had descended into hell, and both had died, all because of one man. No, he was still a youth, just a perversely strong one. *n. Normal update resume tomorrow. Finally back from family side. Sorry if the previous pace was lacking. Thank you for reading and Happy New Year!